Call the Administrative Finance Committee of a Whole meeting to order for February 19th, 2020. I am Mary Sullivan, the City of Darien Alderwoman for Ward 5 and Chairperson of the Admin and Finance Committee. Today we are here to conduct a Committee of the Whole with all of the city alderpersons, our mayor, our city administrator, and senior staff present to review, discuss, conduct Q&A, and come to a consensus for the fiscal year 2021 budget. I will serve as your facilitator tonight. Tonight is the first of a series of meetings with the goal being to have a public hearing on the budget and the city council vote on the budget for fiscal year 2021 on Monday, April 6th. I plan to conclude tonight's meeting no later than 9 p.m. We will have our next meeting on Tuesday, February 25th in council chambers at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's goal is to start with the general fund revenue and then move into the expenses in the city council area, administrative, community development. Our police chief, Thomas, is not here tonight, so we will hold off discussing the police budget until next Tuesday, February 25th. If time allows tonight, we will start in on municipal services. All of you here in the chamber received a hard copy packet on February 11th of the budget, and it has been published on our city website for our residents to review. Any questions? Okay. Getting started then with the general fund. Just for the audience purposes and for our televised audience, the general fund accounts for all revenues and expenditures which are not accounted for in other funds. This is the largest fund of the city, providing for the majority of the city's revenues, expenditures, and services. The general fund is supported predominantly with taxes, licenses, and fees. It funds the operations of the city's police department, municipal services department, community development, and streets divisions, mayor, city council, and administration. Okay. If we'll refer to the memorandum dated February 11th, 2020 from Brian Vanna, city administrator. As you look at the budget and the general fund and then the supporting notes, the maintenance budget is clearly the area that reflects only the anticipated cost to continue current essential activities and programs. We'll be honing in on tonight the discretionary budget, which is the budget expenditures that relate to city services, employee items that are not essential or required. However, they are important in maintaining the level of citizen services and employee expenses that have been provided in previous years. Priorities expressed by the City Council are reflected here. Okay. So we'll go right into then, if you want to turn to City of Darien General Fund Summary, Fiscal Year 21. And just in summary, we're looking at a budget request for revenue for fiscal year 21 of $15,216,790,000 with a total expenditures of $13,212,977,000 with an ending fund balance of $3,103,362,000. Noting that as the city continues its trend of doing a 3-year plan, it shows a transfer to capital funds in the amount of $2,800,000. And then for fiscal year 22 and 23, it's noted as a forecast.
Mary,
Okay.
quick question. Sorry. The sheet you guys have is 210 because we're
February 10th. Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at 27. I'm sorry. I
That's
pulled up
okay.
the wrong one.
Just
Yeah, the fund balance I have is $3,160,462.
right. 62.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what we have.
Yeah, there was just a couple updates since
Okay,
that
I'm sorry,
early
guys.
version.
No worries.
Nope, thank you for pointing that out. Okay. I had a loose copy. So-
Before we get started, what is the process now of when going through the budget of if we want to delete or add items to the budget? I I mean, is there a vote on each item, or how does that process work if something needs to come out?
As we go through the budget, Mary will ask you if you agree with if it's a discretionary item, does everybody agree with that expenditure? The majority rules.
Okay.
I would even take it one step further, to be honest with you. Just because it's in maintenance, in my mind, doesn't mean it's gospel.
Right.
I mean, I think if you want to challenge something and it's in
Yep.
maintenance, I mean, I think you should do that too, not just focus on the discretionary.
I totally agree with you.
Right, and just to keep things moving along, I mean, at times, we're gonna look for consensus, but at any point, you feel free that you want something to do a deeper dive, raise your hand, and we'll start talking about it. But we're just gonna, obviously, just to try to keep things moving on, I'm not gonna go every single line item. But if there's something that we've skipped over or haven't given due process to, just let us know.
Just in furtherance too, Mary, we had talked about if there is at loggerhead on some issue and it's taking too long and it can't be resolved tonight, we'll put it on a list and we could come back to that at the end of maybe the final budget meeting, whenever that might be.
Right. Or some things might need more research to be done. If with questions being, asked tonight, staff might need to go back and give more information. So, but to start up, I'm going to go ahead and defer to Brian to explain the revenue in the general fund for the budget.
Okay, thank you. The budget for the public is beginning May 1st, so the budget we're talking about will be effective May 1st through April 30th. So the revenue estimates, we have some of the things, obviously, we might have all of the revenue in for a particular year, but a lot of things we don't. We only have revenue in our reports through, typically in February 19th, we'll have revenues through the end of January. So we look historical numbers, we look at estimates for this number to see where we're at, and then I come up with those estimates for the fiscal year 21 budget. And then looking forward, we stay pretty conservative and consistent unless there's something like we know there's going to be a new MFT tax or something, we could place that in. But otherwise, we stay fairly consistent over 3 years on the revenues. So as Alderwoman Sullivan mentioned, the general revenue sheet itself is broken out by taxes, license, fees, fines, permits, and other income. And the numbers also in the fiscal year ending 20 estimated actual column, I look through the budget meetings and I will update those as necessary, because occasionally I'll look at a number, maybe it will say in my report 100,000, but the report from the city might already have 110,000 in, but I didn't have the most updated report when we're preparing this, because again, we start preparing this in November, December, and then we have minor updates. So again, most of the revenues are fairly consistent. Some of the items that we get from the state, like the income tax, I rely on the Illinois Municipal League. They'll do estimates every year for the state shared revenues, and the income tax is the largest. So again, I'll be happy to answer any specific questions on revenue items. We typically do come in fairly close, but do try to be conservative on the revenues.
On local use, we're up 146,000. What's local use again? Refresh my memory.
That's the out-of-state sales tax that we collect. So there's sometimes people will be out of state, buy things from Illinois, and they are to report that as the tax.
Figuring you're not going to get charged the sales tax. The Supreme Court had a decision last year. You'll notice that number is up. Our sales tax is actually down. Local use tax is actually up.
Correct.
More and more places are required to collect that.
Perfect.
Mary, before you continue on, if you don't mind, I'd like to take about 2 minutes to do a bird's eye, about a 20,000-foot overview of what's happening in all of this, because once we get down into the weeds, we tend to focus on $1,000 of supplies, and I'd like to do a big picture type of thing for the council to be aware of as we start getting into the discussions of these $1,000 items. If you don't
Please
mind.
do. Absolutely, Mike.
First of all, as you said, the general fund, this is where all our revenue comes from, and this is where we we also generate the surplus that we generate in here beyond 3 months' worth of our needs. We transfer to the capital projects fund for our roads and sidewalks and all those maintenance type items. I guess what I'd like to point out here, this is a 3-year forecast that we're working with. And if you look at the current fiscal year from the general fund, we were able to transfer $3.8 million from the general fund to the capital projects fund to service our roads and all the other infrastructure type projects. You look at the coming fiscal year, we're looking at reducing that by $1 million down to $2.8 million. And we can get into the specifics. Part of it is police pension, other expenses and everything that are eating up more of that surplus, but we're going to be down $1 million what we're projecting for next year. As you get to the second year out, we're only projecting $1,750,000, so down another $1 million what we're able to transfer to capital projects. And by the third year out, we're down to $1 million from the 3.8 we are this year. On the flip side of that, as you get into the capital projects fund, you'll see those same amounts going in. This year, the 3.8 million, the 2.8 we're projecting for next year, the 1,750,000 and the 1 million. That's where the capital projects fund, that's the only place it really gets its revenue from, aside from just a small tax, real estate tax thing that it's getting. So that's the only place that it's generating its revenue. And if you look at the expenses in the capital projects fund, you look at the next 3 years, and those expenses for the coming year, we're looking at spending a little over $3 million. Fiscal 2022, the next fiscal year, about $3.2 million, and the year after that, about $2.3 million. Well, obviously, if we're only contributing down 2.8 this year, 1.7, and then down to 1, the 1 million obviously is not going to be enough to sustain an average expenditure in that fund of about $2.5 million just for keeping up with what we consider our, sort of our core infrastructure projects. So if you look at it, I wanted to take it the next step and have the council consider this. If we say that our average infrastructure costs are going to approximate $3 million a year, what's it going to cost us to come up with that $3 million a year? Because as you start going out to year 4, year 5, we're not going to have that surplus in the general fund to do it. If you look at approximately, Brian ran some numbers on a bond issue, but just to give you some context, if we had $1 million a year bond payment, it would increase, and we used my house as an example as the typical Darien household. If we had $1 million annual bond payment come due, it would increase my real estate taxes just under $200, about $190 per year. That's for $1 million. Now, if we're saying our capital projects requires $2 to $3 million a year, you have to double or triple that. Again, I'm looking strictly trying to translate it into real estate tax, which isn't fair. But if you need to generate those revenues, if we're not generating it through real estate taxes, you're going to have to get it through some other form of tax, assuming that you were saying that all those expenses are intact. So again, as you're looking down, every dollar we're able to save today is just going to impact us that much more down the road and leave more funds available for that. So even though it might only be a $1,000 item that we're looking at, don't be afraid. If it's $1,000 we can save, let's go for it, because it is going to impact what we're doing down the road. The other thing that's in this general fund revenue forecast, right now, our annual real estate taxes that we levy in the general fund are about $2.2 million. They've been about the same. They've been constant since I've been here in 2007. What's happened, though, is our police pension contribution has been increasing steadily. So we have not increased our real estate tax assessment to cover that increase. Instead, we said we're going to pay it out of the general fund. So out of that $2.2 million, for example, this coming year, our police pension contribution is $1.9 million, which means only $300,000 left of our real estate taxes is available for funding other items. I mean, granted, you have sales tax and other things to help. But as you get into the third year of the forecast, I asked Brian, because I noticed if you look at the third year out under the revenue, the first line, the real estate taxes, this year's roughly 2.2 million, next year's 2.2 million, second year out is 2.2 million. But if you look at the third year out, it's 2,368,000. So it's up $140,000. I pushed Brian on that. Why the increase in that revenue? Because we haven't been increasing our real estate taxes. All he did was increase our real estate taxes to an amount sufficient to hit the projected police pension contribution. So 100% of our police pension, of our real estate taxes will be going to the police pension fund by the time we get to year 3, assuming all the investment performance and the actuarial results and everything pan out. But even in year 3 here, there is an automatic $140,000 real estate tax increase, which would equate to about $20 to $25 for the average household. And then again, as you get years out from there, again, we have to have it fully funded by 2040. That number will probably continue to grow. So again, I just wanted to do more the big picture that the amount we have to contribute to the capital projects is decreasing, and at some point, we're going to have to decide. We want our roads taken care of, we want our sidewalks, are we going to have to cut back on that? Again, the more we can save now, the better that fund is going to be funded. And maybe we can push that off another year or two or not have to increase things quite as much. So again, just trying to give a little bit of context in terms of what these numbers we have we're dealing with.
It's very helpful. Thank you so much, Mike.
Mike, just a question, because you and I had talked about those bonds, and the scenario you used for the bonds was what again? I'm sorry, you said $1 million?
No, I just took an example that you had, and I wasn't even using it for a bond payment, but the second one, the yellow one, 15-year, 15 million, 25 year.
The yellow, okay.
Just the only reason I chose that,
Yeah.
it has an annual payment of $926,000, so I'm saying that's close to $1 million.
Got it, okay, and
that-
that's for the a $15 million bond.
And I'm not saying, I'm saying
Got it.
ignore the bond, but I'm saying if we have to come up with $900,000 or $1 million to fund street projects,
Yes.
then that $1 million is going to equate to almost $200 annual. Because you're not going to do a bond issue for $15 million every year for streets.
Correct.
Or even to cover 5 or 6 years worth of streets. You're not going to do that by a bond issue. That you're going to have to cover out of current income. It's not like you're doing a capital project where you would do a bond for it, but I just use those numbers that you developed there
Right.
to try and put some context into what the ramifications are of that $1 million of, if we have to come up with an extra $1 million to contribute to capital projects, what would it cost the average homeowner,
Yeah.
assuming we did 100% on real estate taxes?
Yeah, because if we needed $1 million, that, over a 20-year period, that extension request is $71,000 per year then, for the million, because you'd break it over 20.
Right.
So just to be clear, so that is for every $1 million, the estimate is $11 added on for just that million every year for a resident, because that annual principal and interest is 71. But that's $1 million. We wouldn't do $1 million because that's not going to help anything. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
How
'cause there was a
many
few
bonds do
examples.
we have left? We have
We have two in the water fund, but we abate those every year, and we have one in this capital projects that Mike mentioned that's done, I think, in 3 years.
I thought it was 23 or 24, right?
Yeah, it's out. I think 24 at the fourth year. If I had a fourth year here,
Is it 4? How much is it per year right now? Is it
24.
About
is that- that's the
200,000 a
small
year.
one. It's
Two-
100
two bills? Okay.
Yeah.
112.
Thanks.
And the others are in the water fund, which really doesn't have a bearing on our
Right.
capital.
but the
projects.
current one, Mike, you said 112, but it's about principal and interest is about 212. I mean, you might have just picked
maybe I
up
was
the.
looking at last year.
You might have just
Oh, yeah, a little over 200,000.
Yeah.
Sorry. Last year was 112 because it's a partial year.
Okay.
Hey, Brian, in respect to the sales tax number, looks like it's relatively flat over the next 3 years. What were your assumptions in developing that number?
Just being conservative. There's a lot of things going on in the retail sales market, a lot of online, and this year, surprisingly, we're running. We're not running as good as I thought we would on the sales tax. We're probably about 2% down. So again, in looking at revenues, unless there's a reason, unless we knew a big shopping center was coming in, I'm going to stay at where we're at now.
Yeah, to me, I mean, it's almost, I'd rather see the number coming down by 2 or 3% a year rather than keeping it flat, because I think you're going to see a continuation of businesses closing down. And I think we just got this number elevated way too high, because if we lose 5% per year, my fiscal year balance at the end of 2023 is 0. I don't know if we ever come up with a contingency plan to what do we do when this revenue starts slipping away, because it's a major driver to cover expenses. I don't know if we go through
All
a
of
formal.
investors, and that's why we have an economic development committee whose goal is to maintain the current businesses and to help build new businesses so that we're not losing that 2% every year.
I mean, with due respect, I mean, they can only do so much. I mean, if a business is going to
and-
close down, they're going to close down. You're not going to stop them.
It's one of the reasons we're proposing a shopping center or retail center over on the Lay School property.
But that's going to be
I understand
way
that.
down the road.
But-
So I'm, like I said, I'm just want to voice my concern that I think the sales tax number is overstated.
Well, I would
So,
tell you that even
that's
the
going to
year,
focus me when I'm going through here, frankly, to find money to more than compensate for that loss in revenue that I'm expecting.
yeah, even the year before from the audit was 5.667, and the strong part about our retail sales tax is we don't take big dips up or down. Even when the economy was not doing well, 10 years ago, we hold our own on the sales tax. We're not relying on car dealers and things that are cyclical. Ours are, our major retailers that we get most of our revenue are very, very solid. Your shopping centers, your Home Depots, things like that. And I don't expect those to decrease, but we'll know more as we go through the year.
Eric, I guess if I can
Yeah.
maybe make you feel a little bit more comfortable
Please
on
do,
that.
because I don't feel comfortable right
No,
now.
and I hear what you're saying, and I would ordinarily agree with you, but look at the next line down, the local use tax. You see, this year we budgeted 574, and we're projected to come in at 721. Like I said, that Supreme Court case is triggering an influx of that. And if you look at the numbers Brian used for the next several years, he's kept it down to the 574
Right.
figure. So in my mind, I didn't push for a change because I think between the two of them, I think it probably will approximate it, but
I hope you're right.
I do too.
I hope you're right.
The
And Eric, I don't know where you're if yours is a gut feeling on the retail market,
Well, it's
or if you've been reading something that shows.
in my ward has probably the highest concentration of the larger stores, and I walk these malls and I see the stores moving out and nothing moving in. So I see that across on Four Corners. I mean, you're seeing what's going on around here. So trying to think it's not going to happen in Darien is you're fooling yourself. It's going to come, and it could be significant dollars. Is all my concern.
Yeah,
I guess I just see it every day, and it's like one store after another moving out.
Okay, yeah, I don't anticipate the sales tax to be dropping at 10 or 5 or 10%, but it's not a crystal ball.
Okay. No, I understand.
Yeah.
I just that's the perspective I'm doing and looking
Sure.
at some of these costs and stuff, and just trying to get us comfortable. So if something did happen to the year, what do we do? Do we raise taxes? Do we cut costs? What are we going to do? Because we have to somehow make up for that loss.
Well, I could tell you when everything tanked in 2009, we had a special meeting and we
Yeah.
came up with a variety of things,
Okay.
either of cuts,
Okay.
and we looked at revenues. And in part, that's why we keep a 3-month reserve and we forecast out over 3 years. If it got really, really bad and you had to hold off projects for a year, that would be something the council would have to consider. But again, I think in the 3-year forecast, I'm very, very comfortable with looking at this over the 3 years and it being very sound.
Yes, Tom.
Mike, really quick question. You mentioned online sales. Is that additional businesses in Darien, or is it like Walmart with additional online sales picking up at the Walmart store?
That would be you buying something from
Or
a
it's an
store in
Amazon.
Ohio, but it's being shipped here in Darien. Now the Supreme Court case requires them to collect tax from you because you're a Darien resident. Somehow, in all the different municipalities, this is where some of your smaller businesses are having trouble. There are exemptions for smaller businesses in that, but theoretically, they're supposed to collect it from you and remit it to Darien. That hasn't been happening, but the state of Illinois has been getting more, which has triggered a larger amount that we've been getting on that local use tax.
Actually, Tom, the state of Illinois, the legislation in the state of Illinois, any business that brings in $200,000 a year through online sales, that money is now going to the state and it's being distributed. In the future, by 2023, the zip code that you use when you make that purchase, be it on Amazon or whatever, will designate that money as Darien money coming back to Darien. So it will come back to you in proportion to the expenditures that take place with residents. That's a piece of legislation that passed last year in the state legislature. So you're going to get more of that money. You're going to get more of that online sales tax revenue coming back to this municipality versus just to the state. This next year it will be just the state.
So just looking at a sample. So if I went to Target and bought something there for $5, I'd pay to to Willowbrook if they had sales tax with the Willowbrook. However, if I went online and they bought it to Target for pickup, we would get it.
The state.
The state, but for the
Then-
past
and
2
then it's-
years, we
then
would
it's
eventually.
It's distributed back to the municipalities,
Okay.
but we'll get, when the zip code is entered, and when the legislation says the zip code will determine where that money goes in the
Okay.
future.
And the state's getting a larger amount now because this law has been passed. Before, everybody would shop online because you figure, hey, I'm not paying sales tax on it, so there was a big savings. Now, I don't know if you do much online shopping, but you notice most of the time there is sales tax added to it. There are exemptions for small businesses, but by and large, you're going to find sales tax charged on almost all your online sales.
Thanks.
Mike, I don't recall. I think it was coming up in 14. I don't have the data on my spreadsheet. For whatever it's worth, we have that 68,000 a year to Home Depot incentive. And I think that's started in about 14.
We're about either 5 or 6 years into the 10-year agreement. right
So, as we're looking out into the fourth year, should be an average of about 68,000 that will not be paid out and stay with us.
now. Well, but the thing you have to look at, if you
Unless they
remember
come back
how that
and force
incentive
you to
agreement
pay
was
it
set
anyway.
up, it was set up over 10 years because they signed 2 5-year extensions. So
Yes.
at the end, when we're not required to make the payment, their lease is also up. So they will either probably come back to us to try and negotiate another deal, or they'll say, we're moving out of here.
Yeah.
Because they can get a better deal someplace else. So I wouldn't count on the savings
point.
of that amount.
Any other questions on the revenue side, the taxes? Discussion, Mike?
Well, I went through most of these with Brian. There's just two items where I think we were picking up a little extra income here. But if you look at the fiscal year 20 estimated actual column, Brian, the first line actually, real estate taxes, you've got $2,252,000. We've collected all the real estate taxes we're going to. We don't get any more past December 31st. The actual number is $2,248,000, so it's only $4,000 different, but that amount is a little bit short. Not a big deal. The municipal utility tax, you're projecting at $6,000. At the end of January was already $6,600, and we should get a little bit more in the coming months.
Which one, Mike? I'm sorry.
Municipal utility
Utility?
tax, about 6 or 7 lines down from the top,
Okay. I have $1,024,000.
just above that, 6,000. It's already at
6,000.
6608 as of January.
That's the replacement.
Replacement tax.
Oh, I'm sorry, today. Oh,
Oh, the
Yeah.
replacement. Okay.
That's replacement.
glasses. Yeah, the replacement tax has been a little higher.
Okay.
The more interesting ones that help us out a little bit, if you go down to the next section, fines, fees, and permits, assuming I'm reading the line right here, ordinance fines, you're projecting at 21,690. Again, at January 31st, we're already at 40,139, so we're already up about $20,000 from there. The next line down, building permit fees, projecting 127. Again, we're already at 132 through January, and probably have a couple more months to go.
The question is, why did we budget for 35,000 and why are we up almost 97 on that?
And typically, it's been that way with building permits. As I go into the budget year, there's no sure things with building permits.
Right, exactly.
As an example, the warehouse or some other developments that may come in. So
Gotcha.
that's on top of our normal, if we don't have any huge building activity, we'll be about $35,000.
So it's mostly from the warehouse, do you think?
I would have to look.
Yeah, the year before.
I can't recall anything more than that. So it's probably mostly that.
Because the year before was the one on Lamont Avenue, correct?
On Lamont, yeah, there was
And
that,
Manning,
you had
but-
the development on Manning Road too, those townhouses.
Right.
Right, gotcha.
Not townhouses.
The houses rolling
The
down.
homes.
Yeah.
And near Our Lady of Mount Carmel, too?
That was a large fee also, correct?
But like Brian said, that you typically don't see, barring something big, and there's not really too much big left for us to develop. So, moving down, next one, telecommunications tax we just talked about. But engineering professional fees reimbursable, projecting 33,505 versus the budget of 74. Again, there as of January, we were already over $61,000, so that'd pick up about $30,000. But on the downside, and I was hoping, and I don't know if the chief, I know he's not here, but DUI technology, we're projecting $12,000, and we only have $712 in revenue from that through January 31st.
Yeah, I'll check all those.
Yeah, could that be a timing thing, maybe, you think, or?
Yeah, I'll have to check. A
Some of them
lot of
can
these,
be.
again, I did estimates,
I go
prior
through
to-
these, and I
to
don't
some of
mean
that
it in a
report.
negative way,
Yeah.
because some of these things do come in, you'll get 100, like your business licenses always come in the early part of the year, so it'll be zero pretty much for 11 months and then hit, so, but where I see differences here, I'll call them to Brian's attention, so he'll have time to go back and evaluate it before we finalize the budget, so I'm gonna be a pain in the ass about some of that stuff as we go through this.
No,
but
that's what your job is, to be a pain in the ass.
Good at it.
We've always appreciated that aspect.
well, there's a consensus on that, Mike.
Yeah, and I know during the prep process, when I would meet with Brian, he did say that obviously, the more veteran alder people here would know that they do take typically a more conservative approach with things, just to, as far as revenues.
And I do have one other item, I forgot to turn the page, but, and this is a positive one too. So on the second page, Brian, the interest income, you're projecting at 65,000. And again, that's January 31st, it was almost 87,000, 86,879. So we're already up 21,000 over that.
Anything else, Mike, in terms of income areas in the general fund?
Not from me.
Brian, anything else that you want to reflect on in
No,
terms
I
of
think
income?
I think that covers it. Again, we'll do a final, when the final budget comes out, we'll refresh all these numbers for the year to date, and any changes will be noted.
So then, obviously, that prior to, I saw that in the schedule, the final budget comes out the week prior to the city council meeting with the updated numbers.
Yeah, and it's more in a final version. We have employee counts and some other information in there. And typically, the actual changes to the numbers, we'll put out a sheet to the council that recaps just the numbers prior to the final budget.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then obviously anything that's discussed and decided during this process is modified in that budget.
Correct.
So it will could look different than what we're looking at today. Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions as it relates to income in the general fund? Okay. Okay, we'll move on then to, in terms of expenses in the general fund, we're going to start with the city council budget. Am I looking at that right? Is that the correct order?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Make sure I'm looking at the 210 versus the 27. So obviously we have a summary spreadsheet, and then we also have the what we'll call the notes, descriptions pages that accompany it, where we have the maintenance budget requests column, and then we also have the discretionary column. Then there's also in the second column to your left, if there's an asterisk, that indicates that there's supporting documentation with it.
Mayor, do you have 210 on council budget for that on the upper right-hand corner?
2.5.
I have 2.5.
Okay.
That's what we have,
2.5.
2.5.
Okay.
I thought my apologies. I thought you
Yeah,
mentioned
no,
210.
you're
My
right.
apologies.
Okay. Yeah, what I'm looking at, which was the huge packet,
Okay.
this sheet says 2.5.
Perfect.
Is that what everyone's looking at?
Yep.
Okay. So we will get started with, I'll just go right down to, if everyone's okay with the descriptions with salaries and benefits, we'll go into operating. And the boards and commissions for $1,000. Cable operations, $6,000. Any conversation about dues and subscriptions, $25,440.
I do.
Yes.
Sorry.
No.
This is, I know it's something new. We just decided to join DuPage mayors and managers, and we said it's going to be a $20,000 annual dues, and it sounded like it was a very positive thing, and sounds like mayor's taking full advantage of that. Thing that sort of surprised me, though, we have $4,000 of out-of-pocket expenses, or I guess expenses for different meetings and everything. I wasn't aware of that when we originally approved it. I don't know whether it would have made a difference, but is somebody prepared to talk a little bit about what those expenses are for?
The DuPage Mayors and Managers has a drive down to Springfield that takes place in April.
Mayor, I'm sorry, just so everybody's on the same sheet, they're on page 8 is all the backup, I think, what the mayor's talking about. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
page 5 is the summary page, and then page 8 is the description, if you want to turn to that, and Mayor's going to talk about that.
Yeah, if you go to page 8, the page 8 shows the breakdown with regard to expenditures for various events. A number of these events are things that we pay out of pocket ourselves, but the Springfield drive down gives us an opportunity to go down to Springfield and meet with state legislators and the governor and help enact the legislative action program of the DMMC.
So is that includes hotel as well as transportation?
Yeah, you could take a bus or not take a bus. A lot of people take the bus down. You go down as a group with the bus. That's a little bit more expensive. Some drive down on their own, but that includes a one-night stay in Springfield. And you meet with the Illinois Municipal League, and they talk about their legislative agenda. But we meet with state legislators. We actually go in there with an agenda in terms of the action program specified by DuPage Mayors and Managers, which are all pieces of legislation which support DuPage County.
So for the budgeting purposes, Mike, I estimated there'd be 5 people from Darien going. I don't know if there'll be 2 or 10, but I use that as a number.
Yeah, but again, this is something that was in the maintenance budget, and it is something new. So I wanted at least everybody to be a little bit aware of this is an expense that we didn't have before, in addition to the dues that we have on there. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's clear on that.
How do you get to $2,000 if the bus is 410?
Pardon me?
Is the total amount $2,000?
Five people.
Times 5 people.
Oh, okay.
Mike, I do have all these in discretionary also.
I'm sorry, you're right. It wasn't discretionary.
Okay,
I apologize.
The Illinois Municipal League, all of you are getting Illinois Municipal League updates. And again, that's another lobbying group that lobbies on behalf of DuPage County. And I believe all of you get that. I think you get daily emails with regard to that.
They put out a magazine every couple of weeks too. It's been
Right.
very helpful.
Right.
We've been in that for a number of years now.
And IML works with the DuPage Mayors and Managers. They work together.
And the one membership I did not include, and it's not shown, is the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. That was about maybe $1,000. That was the membership we have now, and now that we're active with mayors and managers and more with IML. But I think part of this process, and the elected group doesn't need to let me know today, but hopefully within the next week, how many would be interested in these events. So if, I'd really like to get a count, because this number could change depending on either the interest of the council or how the council wants to, if you want to rotate or you want to have the ability for everybody to go, that would affect this number.
But that's obviously something new. No one went before to the drive down?
No, because we're new to the conference
Right,
again.
so you had
we
to be a
didn't-
member of DuPage Mayors and Manuals to take advantage of that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, when prior to our leaving in 2006 or 7, 3 or 4 of us would go every year down to Springfield. And actually now it's better organized because now we actually go down and it's just all business. We meet with the state legislators. We go to the IML. Back then it was not as well organized and we did not accomplish things that we hoped we would accomplish. So I think that, and we only had 2 or 3 aldermen who actually went because it's a day and a half. It's 3 hours down, 3 hours back, and just one night, overnight stay.
And the 3 most popular are the legislative reception, the annual dinner, and then the drive down. Those are the 3 that take a larger part of that.
And I think all of us, with the exception of, I think Ted attended the legislative dinner, which I think all of you saw the benefits of being part of that. the golf outing and all that, we pay for ourselves.
I noticed that was blocked out. Bring that up.
And, yeah.
Any more questions about Tom?
In regard to account 124206 cable operation 6,000, I just looked the last 3 years we've spent 3,400, 2,150, and we're estimated to be 4,500 this year, and we budget 6,000. I know we're being again conservative, but it doesn't appear that we're ever near the $6,000 number, and I'm wondering if it makes more sense to make it $5,000. We haven't approached that number yet.
Right, we're down volunteers now, and we don't have, we're down to one volunteer now for the films and Al Kohout, so we might hit that number, yeah.
Okay.
It's a little harder this year with the loss of the volunteers.
Is there any way of recruiting new ones, or is the equipment too technical? That
No,
people
we
can't
can,
be trained on
if
it?
anybody is interested and they have time, I mean, it would be great if we had 2 more solid volunteers in that area.
Can we put that into Direct Connect?
Yep,
Be nice to put in Direct Connect or something that we're looking for. Somebody might have an interest.
stereo.
Especially if it's AV,
Right.
AV in
Is
high
there an
school or
age
something.
requirement? Could it be a high school student?
I'd love if a high school student, the only thing we try to avoid is
Mitchell.
just temporary people.
Yeah.
Right, you want someone consistent.
Yeah, the volunteers we had doing this, we're doing it a long time. They do a great job for us. We just lost them over time. So,
Right.
and
You just don't want a different person every time.
it's hard. Otherwise, if you're not doing it, if you had 10 volunteers and somebody did it once a year, they would never remember how to do it. So if we have what we have now with Al, and if we had 2 volunteers or 3, that work. 2 volunteers is really, really good. 3 gets a little too much, and 1, obviously, we can run short sometimes.
Okay. At this point, you think it's the best thing to do is stay with 6,000?
At this point, until we
Okay.
until we have different information. I'm sorry, Mayor. On the mayors and managers, then,
Yes.
I don't know if there's any discussion, if anybody wants to express their interest in going now, do you want to rotate people, or should we just, do you want to get back to me if you have interest in going, and I can adjust this budget accordingly?
Well, I mean, maybe since it's our first year, maybe 3 people going is sufficient versus 5. I mean, is it like divide and conquer? Are you trying to talk to a lot of different legislatures? Is that why it's better to have more people there?
Yeah, you try
Or
to.
are you traveling in a pack? I mean,
You'll actually be given a legislative action program, which will specify the things that we want to push in Springfield, and all of these are things. I'm part of the legislative committee. We're meeting again Tuesday next week. We're going to go through pending legislation that's down in Springfield. We make decisions as to whether or not we're going to take a neutral stance, pro stance, against. But we have basically 5 items in our legislative action program, pension programs, tort reform, things like that, that we will go down to Springfield and we will talk to our state legislators about those. And so if you go down and I go down and Joe goes down, all 3 of us will be talking to different people about those same items.
But you're typically talking to your representative. In
Right.
this area, we have 3. We have our senator and our 2 state representatives that represent.
And
So
this year we're going to get to meet with the governor. Last year they met with the lieutenant governor. This year we get to meet with the governor.
And
So you're obvious-
in past years, though, they tried to send us, when I was more involved, they would send you not just to your local, they would want you to branch out,
Right.
almost to make new relationships. So if you pick up a legislator who's from Springfield or something, because it was a part about reaching out, because we have really good access to our local reps now. So they try to expand that a little bit to get out to new people.
So the drive down is based on you and Mayor Marquez and then 3 alderpersons, correct?
Well, 5, whoever the 5.
But it says based on 3 alderpersons under the.
Well, typically I had expected, the mayor and I would go, and then 3 elected officials on top of that.
Who are certainly currently serving on committees for DuPage Mayor Emanuel?
Eric is,
I am.
and I'm on legislative. Eric's on regulatory.
Right.
Joe's on
Transportation.
transportation. Joanne's on legislative. Brian's on the managers group.
So would it make sense for it to be those individuals that would go, that are on the committees? since they're most knowledgeable about what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Quick procedural question. The event takes place 2 days before our budget. So is this budgeted for this year's budget or next year's budget? It's April 29 and April 30, and our
Yeah, that's,
fiscal year doesn't begin until May 1.
yeah, this looks out after May. So,
This is anticipation of going in April of 2021, or are we?
yes, actually, you're correct. So
Okay.
this does not actually cover this year, so we would have to look at the contingency if there's interest going this year.
Good point. Yeah. So that would come out of the current year budget contingency?
If there's
Just like
interest
you
in the-
made money, you just, when we did the half-year membership, it came out of the current budget? Because it wasn't
Yes,
originally
and-
budgeted
and-
for the membership
correct.
for DuPage Mayor Manual.
Correct, and, we could account for that. I mean, those numbers are accounted for
Right.
because we know, but this, if we had $2,000, I'd look at the contingency fund to go this year.
Okay. Yes, Tom?
Quick side question. For city council, has that ever been adjusted for inflation? For city,
By ordinance,
for
and it's been-
salaries?
The city council pay is by ordinance and has not been adjusted since I've been here, and I don't know if it's been adjusted previous to that.
In 1997, when I came on city council, aldermen had a stipend of $2,400. Probably in the early 2000s, Joanne, I don't know if you remember, but we decided to up it to $3,600, which is where it's at now. But it was stipulated that the current council could vote that increase, but the individual could not get it until they ran for election and got elected again. So, and that would be the procedure. If at this point you said, let's raise it from, 36 to 48, you couldn't get that until you ran for your new 4-year term. So it's been at 34, probably close to 15
I mean,
years.
36.
or more.
36.
And it's basically a stipend. It's not really,
Yeah, just asking a question.
it's listed as a salary, but it's a stipend, in my mind.
I agree. I personally don't think it should be changed. I mean, I think most of us do this because our heart is in it and trying to do something for the city. To give me an extra $1,000, I just assume the city keep it. We've got enough issues here,
Yeah,
and I'd
I
rather
agree.
see them put it in roads and everything else. I don't want it.
Yeah, but some younger people have daycare and other things as well to come. So if you want more diversity, more people, and they got additional expenditures that maybe older
$1,000
people
isn't gonna
don't.
cover a whole
So
lot of daycare, I can tell you that.
Well, for the meetings.
Are you talking about for people who would potentially run in the future? to
correct.
cover-
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's like a lot of things too. People who volunteer for their churches, their schools, and other things, they get nothing.
School board doesn't get paid at all,
Mm.
and they work nuts.
Park District, too. I don't think they get.
Park
paid.
District.
Our district does not. Mm-mm.
And yet there are communities where the elected officials make a lot more. The mayor of Willowbrook makes $25,000 a year. The mayor of Darien makes about $7,000 a year. So, I mean, it's,
Mayor Bolingbrook makes $129,000 a year.
He's full-time.
And he's got a golf course. And he's got a golf course.
That's not, they don't.
Plus $500,000.
but I think Bob Barnett, who's the mayor of Downers Grove, makes $3,400. I mean, it varies by
Goes out,
community.
and there's no, it's all based on the individual municipality gets to make that decision.
I was very curious. I never knew the history, so I was asking.
Well, that was a good history lesson. Thank you. Any other questions on that first page of the summary for city council? Because then we'll go on to the second page. The public relations, the Heart of Darien Award, and the pins, pens, and miscellaneous, $1,300. Training and education, $1,000.
Did we use that this year? Go for any training? I think Joanne, you
I
went for
do.
training, yeah.
I use it.
About 150 typally, just for, especially for the new members.
Yeah,
So
Eric
they
and I
don't-
went to a day-long program.
Okay, we put in the budget where $1,000 where no person could take more than $100. So if you wanted to go to a program that would cost $200, reimburse you up to $100 of that. But typically, Joanne's taken advantage of it the last several years, but outside of that, there's very few people.
Good work.
Yeah, and as a new, I think Eric and I mean, I'll speak for myself, but we spent a day, and I found it very informative. There could have
Yeah, I'm
been.
not trying to discourage.
Oh, yeah,
it,
no,
but
I'm just saying, it
that's
was
where
money
the,
well spent for a
that's
new
where the amount came
alderperson.
from, because there's 10 of us, and there's $100 apiece.
Oh, that's, yeah.
budgeted in that.
So you don't have to, yeah, you could request it if there was something that came up that you felt was good use of your time.
Right, and appropriate to the city
Right.
function. Right.
Okay. Moving on then to contractual services and trolley contracts for $600 for the Halloween party and the holiday lights.
Sorry,
Yes.
Alderwoman, just to go back to 4325, and I showed this as, again, a title, but there's no money under it, the Environmental Committee Recycling Event.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about
That's been in the last few years, and it's typically our electronic event. I think it was going to be up to about 4,000, maybe about this year, and I took that out. It was very good for a couple of years, but residents, individually have ways to get rid of that through our garbage program. So while the event was nice, there's options for residents, so I just took that out, and I wanted to bring it up, make sure
Can
it was
you,
highlighted.
how many years in a row have we done it? Just because,
Probably 2, I believe, yeah.
okay.
It was 2
So
years.
taking a year off and possibly bringing it back would, is not unheard of.
Yeah, but in my 3-year budget, I took it out.
You took it out
And,
completely?
yeah, we gave, a good opportunity for people to clean out and get rid of those things. And a lot of things now, they can work the appropriate sticker or fee, and the waste company will come and pick it up. And there's still other events throughout the county that might
Right.
take recycling, so.
I know Christ the Servant
Yeah,
Church,
the
they
churches
they
do it,
the
too.
Electronic recycling
Yeah.
a couple times a year. I think.
They do it several times.
Okay,
And they're not
thanks.
required, obviously, to be a parishioner or a resident to do that, so.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Anything else under equipment for the city council summary of expenses? Okay. If not, then we'll move on. Just, put this book back together, if you don't mind, so that doesn't all... We'll go on to administration department budget.
Mary, if you wouldn't mind just stating what page you're on.
Okay,
Maybe this
absolutely.
makes
So
it
I am
much
looking
easier.
at the summary for administration department budget dated 2/6/20, and with the supporting page of number 11, starting with number 11. Okay. With salaries, benefits, operating costs, contractual, and capital. I'm going to be, I have obviously in one hand the summary page, spreadsheet, we'll call it, and then I'm going to be more so reading down through the description page where it has the department maintenance budget request and then the city council discretionary expenditures. So we'll go with the, with the categories as we've noted going along. So salaries and overtime, social security benefits, Medicare, all of that, I'm going to go, unless there's any questions on that, I'm going to go down to operating, dues and subscriptions. There's an amount of $1,190. Then on to liability insurance.
I've got a comment about that. I did talk to Brian about this, and let me give you a little bit of history first.
Yeah, about
If-
the
if you-
program, right?
Yeah, if you notice, next to liability insurance, it says $245,000 surplus. Okay, everybody sees that? Okay, currently, this is for Irma, our liability carrier. And what's happened is they take the premium dollars that we give them, and they invest it, and depending on their investment experience, we get a return on those dollars. And depending how it performs, we've actually been able to develop a credit, and we currently have a credit with them of about $500,000, $500,000.
Wow.
Okay, so, and we've been earning over 7% because they have much more flexibility investment opportunities than we have. Now, it's not something we can call them tomorrow and say, give us a check for $500,000, but we can say when our premium comes up, and typically we pay it, what, in December, something, Brian? December,
By the end of January.
December, January, so right at about the first of the year, we pay that, and we can use the amount up to our credit for paying that premium. So if you notice, this year Brian's got $35,000 in there, compared to last year was, $270,000, $280,000. He's using $245,000 of that surplus that we have for covering this year's premium. If you look at that account over the next 3 years, he's using it this year in year 1 and year 2. What I would suggest, since we're looking at the 3 years and the bottom line at the end of 3 years doesn't change, why not leave that surplus on deposit for an extra year, push it off so we're not using it until years 2 and 3 instead of years 1 and 2? Because if we're able to earn 7 or 8% on the money instead of the 1.5 roughly that we're getting from the money market on our money, it just allows us for an opportunity to earn maybe about another $25,000 by leaving it on deposit that extra year. So that was my only suggestion. Again, it wouldn't change the 3 year, but it would change the breakdown of it. And instead of having $35,000 this coming year, it would be closer to last year's number, and then the last 2 years would drop down to the $35,000. If you look at year 3, it's projected at $294. So that $294 in year 3 would drop down by $250,000 at that point.
Is there any way that if we push it out the 2 years, that if we don't use it, that they could take it away in any way, shape, or form?
No, they track it by municipality.
Never an
thing
issue.
you cannot-
Nothing the state can come in and be like, oh, sorry. thanks
No,
for
no,
playing."
those, the insurance company allocates losses every year. So they go back a particular year, and that year's either closed out or not closed out. And that's in part how that surplus comes, on hold for us. But there's nobody outside of the IRMA could take that.
So if there was a catastrophic loss to the city, they can't dip into that fund to, and I'm just saying
No, it's
hypothetically.
IRMA's a municipal pool, and there's guidelines there. In a worst case scenario, if a community had to pay out $50 million, there are ways to assess back for that claim year, and that hasn't happened. I mean, the insurance coverage is excellent, and the limits are very high, so it's not likely that would ever happen. So this money's been on reserve now for a few years and growing, so I'm not concerned at all that we would lose that for an extra payment of any kind.
Because if that's the case, I got no problems if you push it out, for.
Yeah, no, Mike and I talked about it, and that's a
So what
good
would you say
idea.
then, your proposed amount, Mike, for the 21 budget then, which should be?
Well, whatever the.
I would add 245,000 in that year, and then in the
Make it
third,
270.
and in the third year,
294 would drop down to basically 59,000.
well, there's 3 numbers that make up that account. It's liability premium, it's our deductibles on the detailed page. So if there's a vehicle accident or something, we have a $2,500 deductible, and then there's legal services. So out of all that total number, the liability insurance is $245,000 that I would have budgeted if we had no surplus. So I would just add the 245 in this year, and then in the third year, I increased that to 259, just for inflation. So I would put back the 245, and then take out the third year.
And theoretically, we should have another $25,000 in there if it earns another 7% for us over the
Yeah.
course of the next year.
And how much is the premium?
The premium, I'm budgeting for next year would be 245,000. And that's just for the general fund. The water fund also has a supplement that we pay for IRMA, but I left that in there to pay.
I think it's a great idea. My concern is, is there a way, in any way, shape, or form, that this could go bye-bye in any way?
Well, the only way I would anticipate is if the stock market went from where it is to zero then theoretically, the investment performance would be a lot less. But it would really have to be dramatic, I would think.
Oh, that would affect the interest, but it would not affect our reserve fund amount.
Okay, then,
That's safe.
okay, because in fiscal year ending 23, to go from 294,921 basically down to, what, you're looking at 35 plus whatever the difference.
Yeah, then-
What's
a
the new
third-
number then for fiscal year '23? What's the recap for,
245,
no, 245 is for '21.
right.
That's
Then
Correct.
35 is for '22.
Wouldn't it be about
Okay.
54,000
No,
or?
No, Brian's
years-
saying we're using 245, right? Isn't that what you're saying, Brian?
Yeah, this year, if we did not have a reserve, I would have added 245,000
To the
into,
30 to the 35.
To the 35.
yeah, into this upcoming fiscal year.
2,000.
In addition to the 35 that you
In
got.
addition to the
So it'd be
35.
280 roughly
Okay.
this year
Okay.
instead of the 35.
And then the second year, again, it would be, now the second and third year, we show no payments. And in the numbers I used, I would have budgeted 252,000 in the second year, but we're not paying that, so. But I understand what you're saying, and I'll just revise those numbers on the sheets.
Yeah, assuming everybody agrees.
But, I mean, let's be realistic. That's 245,000 we've added to this year's budget.
Right.
Which means somewhere along the line, you have to look at 245,000 that we might have budgeted for other things that we might have to cut.
Well, not if you're looking at it in the 3-year time frame.
Yeah, but I mean, we're looking this year, the cash flow for this year.
The other way of looking at that too, you've got to remember that this 500,000 that we have is like a one-time deal. It really means that our bills, if it wasn't for that, our bills going forward will be $250,000 more per year as you look out to year 4, 5, and 6. And again, just aggravating that initial statement that I made about only having $1 million to move to the capital projects in year 3.
Yeah, I looked, when Mike and I talked about it, I looked at it the same way. If you make those two changes, the year 3 is going to be exactly like it is. Cash flow is not an issue for us. We're fortunate. We're not running to the bank every payroll and every bill payment. We have the cash flow to carry us out if we do this. So I wouldn't think that the council would need to cut 245 to approve this.
No, but I wouldn't discourage them. So,
So we would be fine, Mayor, we would be fine if we switch it up like this.
I just remember the discussion we had and why we were doing it, so that's why I
Oh,
questioned
right,
it.
I understand.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion or questions regarding this change in the liability insurance, the way we're building it out from this year and for fiscal year '22 and '23? Okay. And I will move on to, we've got legal notices, maintenance and equipment, then we've got postage, and then the next area, and printing and forms with a dollar amount in the city council discretionary expenditure fund is public relations, which has seen a much bigger increase for fiscal year '21. Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, it shows a 0 for the Darien Neighbors magazine because we've replaced that. There's, I've anticipated 3 informational flyers. We may do that, we may not. If the council doesn't want to do that, we wouldn't have any money in. But there will come, something similar to Chief Thomas's letter. You know, he put that out now, and we'll be mailing that out this week sometime or early next week. But this allows us to do a few of those throughout the year, should something come up. City surveys, we always have a membership to SurveyMonkey, and we'll do that periodically, and we'll probably actually start doing more of that. The Citizen of the Year has not changed, and there's $8,100 in expenses and $4,000 in reimbursement. And the council recently approved the retainer with Metro Strategies now, so I've put in for the next year those expenses. The quarterly newsletter, if we were to do 4 newsletters, 3 4-pagers, and 1 8-page, that total cost would be $24,196. So we haven't, again, those newsletters were new for us. The mayor and I talked about 4, but that's ultimately in the proposed budget.
Brian,
So,
that's one thing that I wanted to discuss a little bit. I know at the goal setting, we had this discussion, Neighbors Magazine, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? And you'll all have your own opinions on it. But from my standpoint, Neighbors Magazine is costing us about $19,000 a year for a publication, 6 times a year. And now we're upping that to $24,000 for something smaller that only includes the city for only 4 times a year. That's probably going to be just as outdated, and yet we're paying $5,000 more on it. I mean, just by staying with Neighbors, we'd be saving $5,000 and probably not hurting our communication at all. Again, then I leave it up to the rest of you to decide whether.
No, I agree with that. I think the flyers and the quarterly newsletter should go. I think that's just wasted money.
yeah, what I recall during the discussions is if we left Neighbors for our own publication, you're right, Mike, in terms of the numbers, but I think part of the concern was the information directly from the city with direct city information would be better for those people who are not on any form of social media, and it's a better form of communication. But that's again up to the council. But that's what I recall in part from that, and so we don't have advertising. Neighbors was a magazine that sold advertising, so they could offset it. But that's up.
But they also got more information. They got it from the school district and other things too. So it was more than they're really going to be getting from us for fewer dollars, actually.
Well, the school district is going to handle their own publication. The park district is going to incorporate their information in their fall, spring, winter, summer booklets. So they've each,
That makes sense. They have that already anyway.
yeah, I mean, they've already got those booklets.
And we
They're
need
so
this
they
for.
include that information. I like the quarterly newsletter. I think
It's
it hits a
waste.
population that doesn't have the internet, doesn't possibly have the connection with the information we put out through social media. I like the fact that 4 pages are dedicated strictly to the city, that it's not advertisement. While we got 4 pages in Neighbors Magazine, those 4 pages, they really weren't 4 pages. Half the page talked about who the elected officials were, their telephone numbers, this and that. So it really didn't amount to 4 pages, whereas this is 4 or 8 dedicated pages to the city of Darien. It goes out to every resident, regardless of whether or not they have the internet or any type of social media platform. So
Will
for
this
me,
include-
I think it's a good expenditure.
Will this also include our water testing and so forth?
The water
we're
report?
able now to switch and do that a bit differently. If we have to follow a couple steps, we're going to talk to the county about putting a address of the report and put the report on our website, and then get that out in direct connect to the general population. So we're doing that in hopes of alleviating the need to send out the 4 pages. I think it was 4 pages of the water report.
Even though the entire population doesn't get direct connect, you're not required to touch every household with the information about the water report?
Chris knows better than I do. There are the communities that have, that do it like I'm talking about, did put it out in some kind of general newsletter, I'm not mistaken. So.
You have to notify the community somehow in
It could be-
print
yeah,
first.
I mean, it could be a letter, it could be anything then, as long as it goes to the general population. Right, Chris, is
Yeah,
that how you
you have to
understand it?
notify your entire customer population. So I think what Brian's alluding to is sending it out to on the bills, or you could even, I think DuPage County ends up sending like a postcard to all their addresses. So you could do a couple of different options, but you do have to advertise it. It doesn't have to be the whole report. As long as you're making the report available online, you have to give there's certain things you have to give. You have to give the whole link, address, and
Then on the water
then you
bill.
also have to have paper copies available for people who may not have access to the internet or whatever. So you just have to follow certain steps. But yeah, you have to notify everybody.
So if we put it on, if the DuPage water, or I'm sorry, DuPage County water bills, if that information goes on the bill, that's good enough. Or
I think the question becomes, like for residents in an apartment building where they may not all get individual water bills, they're not each individually getting notified. So how are you making that notification to each customer? They're still considered a customer, but they're not getting a notification, potentially. Same with a renter, potentially, in a house, somebody who's renting a household, the landlord may be getting the bill and paying the bill, and they may not. So
we might end up, on something like that, if it was just to mail for that, I would do some kind of a postcard bulk mailing to everybody in town, much reduced fee, plus included on the water bills. But we don't have to do add it to the newsletter anymore.
Do you still have the deadline requirement by July 1st?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, my quick comment on this is I'm sort of looking at from what I do for work, whether it's a product or a service, and after quarterly newsletter, we have 5 special events for movies on carriage greens and additional special events. And if we want to maximize the amount of people that go out to those events, I think it would be key to make sure we communicate those events in the newsletter potentially. I don't know, is that your thought with the newsletter? If we're gonna have these events, we want people to go out. I think it's important that we communicate to them. So, making cars, you want to have people know about the new cars you're putting out there. So if we're going to have these special events, we also
Yeah,
put
you can
effort
put
to
signs
make
up
sure
around the community showing that, like they do for the Darien Dash and stuff. I mean, you can
Yeah, but
easily
Eric-
accomplish that without a newsletter.
The whole purpose of going to Metro Strategies, one of the goals we gave them is that we want to humanize government. We want people to see who we are, what we're all about. And one of the ways I believe you do that is with that quarterly newsletter. It's not just the Darien Direct Connect. It's not just Nextdoor or all those social media platforms. I think the quarterly newsletter is an integral part of the whole communication program with our residents, because through that newsletter we can write articles and show pictures of things which humanize government. I'll give you, for instance, I was driving down Plainfield Road and I had a meeting at Starbucks with another resident, and the guys from Public Works were putting up the Christmas wreaths on the lights along Cass Avenue. They had the cherry picker and they were up there putting the wreaths up, and I thought, wouldn't it be neat to take pictures of that and then put those pictures on Direct Connectors so that people knew that those things just didn't get up there automatically by themselves. That somebody had to do that, and that's one of the city services that you get. Downers Grove Pub comes out with their little film bits about
planting a tree.
how to deal with the leak. We need to communicate the good things we do. People, to a certain extent, don't understand. They take for granted, I think, some of the things we do on a day-to-day basis that are very positive. I mean, people will compliment and say, you got great snow plowing, you have this, you have that. Somebody called me up the other day and says, what's with the lines on the street in front of my house? How many, so I'm explaining to them what the lines mean. And then when they hear about it, they think that's great. Well, you put that information out there, or you show the guys out there doing that, and all of a sudden everybody knows the city of Darien does something special.
Online.
So I think the newsletter helps that process. It's not the end all or be all, but I think it's a definite contributing factor to that humanizing government and letting people know what we truly do.
Just going back to our goal-setting session, I think a universal theme, however you want to define it, throughout that session by pretty much everyone here, was that we need to improve our communications. So now it's up to us to define how we go about doing that. Another thing I think we all heard loud and clear from our community, our constituents, this last summer and fall was, you need to do a better job communicating to us. Now, we have done a lot of communicating through other, avenues. Obviously, we missed that there wasn't time to print things in the Neighbors Magazine to notify of certain meetings. We put things out electronically on the city website. People who even got Direct Connect didn't take the time to read Direct Connect. And that changes are being made to the e-newsletter so that it is more compatible, more concise, easy to read on a mobile device, down and dirty, basically, so to speak. But I think we're selling ourselves short on thinking that our electronic communication can solely deliver our message to the community. I mean, at least initially. I mean, we need to at least maybe for the first year try to do our best to almost over communicate and then decide, okay, have we been successful in getting more people online and electronically signing up for the Twitter and the electronic news, and we can back off the paper copy. But the upside of doing a newsletter that's solely dedicated to the city versus Neighbors Magazine or any other kind of magazine that contains information from a lot of other groups is it won't be buried within. It'll be prevalent, it'll be concise, it'll be all relevant just to the city. It won't be hidden behind a cover story that people don't feel relevant. It won't be, it'll scream out to them the minute they see it because the front page will be packed with information.
So,
Tom?
Mary stole my thunder because it was exactly the same type of thing I was going to say is, although I think personally it's a little bit overpriced from what I was expecting it to be for the first year based on the feedback we've received from the residents regarding you don't communicate. I mean, looking on social media, we get blamed that we don't communicate a lot. And why I don't think all the blame is actually deserved. Let's try to overcompensate maybe a little bit the first year, and let's see how this works. If we do 4 newsletters, and we better emphasize in the newsletters that you need to join Direct Connect, and if we can double our Direct Connect between now and next year, then maybe we don't need 4 newsletters in the next year. We can do 2 newsletters. In regard to the informational flyers, I'm not sure we need a budget for 3 informational flyers. Since we've only used 1 this year with the chief of police, right? So this is kind of a new thing also. So if my preference would be to reduce that if we're going to reduce anything. In regard to the special events in the bands, this is new to us also. I don't know if we need to budget for 5 of them the first year. Let's see how they work. Let's see whether they're successful or not. And maybe we do 3 this year instead of 5, and we can reduce our budget slightly based on that. That's my thoughts on it.
Also on the newsletter, again, as I mentioned, what we're looking at is 4, and one of those is 8 pages. And I don't think, Mayor, we decided on that 8-page when it would be and if we would need the 8 pages in one. But for budgeting purposes, we did that. But we would talk some more and see if that was if 8 was necessary. Again, now that the water report's not needed, I don't know that we would fill 8.
I think if we did 4 pages, Tom, I think it'd be about 19,000 versus the 24,000. It's almost or it'd be,
About
20 or
that number, yeah.
21,000. I think it's only.
Yes, that's what it says on page 4 of the
There's
stuff.
supporting documents for the quarterly newsletter. What's the page number again, Tom?
Page 4 of the supporting documents.
Supporting documents.
Page 19 of our
Right.
packet.
As far as the concerts, we really were looking at not necessarily 5 concerts, but we were looking at possibly 5 events. That's why Brian budgeted the way he did. April is looking to be the one who manages that, puts that together for us.
Joe, April is with the Chamber of
Chamber
Commerce.
of Commerce. April, I'm sorry for the audience sake. April Padlick, who's the chamber person, April will be organizing this if this is approved again. That's not a given. But we were looking at possibly 1 concert a month, June, July, and August. We were looking at the possibility of something in October and possibly a winter fest. So the 5 is inclusive of 2 events that may not even take place, Tom. And she's looking to get sponsors. So we're looking at defraying some of the cost, like for instance, going to Chuck Pine and saying, Chuck, would you sponsor one of these bands. Chuck would sponsor it. He'd bring his food truck there, and then he would sell the food that night at that concert. Go to John Manos. John, would you sponsor one? So those costs, while they're there, they show as $15,000. We may not spend $15,000 because of the sponsorships.
Yeah, I originally had looked at $2,000 an event, but because it's new, I thought I better put a contingency up in there. You know, example, somebody mentioned, are we going to have, temporary bathrooms out? Are we going to use inside? And just a few things came up that I'm not sure, depending on how many people we have and different things. And then for the special events management, as the mayor mentioned, when I had talked to April, I had anticipated $2,000 per event. So if we plan a concert and that concert's concluded and done, then I can make a payment to her of $2,000. So that was per event, and that's how I came up with those numbers.
This would go to her or the chamber?
Her. Yeah, I'd have to do a separate agreement with her. She's doing that outside. It's not a chamber event. It would be something, we had looked at possibility of, there's firms that do this and a person doing that. And when we started talking to April, I knew that would be the perfect person to do this for us. And obviously she has experience with the community now and doing this somewhat for the chamber when they do their Darien Fest.
The other thing to consider, the Lions Club is talking about doing their Darien Day in the park over at Carriage Greens. I don't know if they've made a definite decision on that yet. They were going to discuss it at the board level. But we're also talking about doing our national night out at Carriage Greens. But again, that would not be included in this money.
Yeah, there would be no expense for that. We're just moving it to the golf course. So yeah, we'd have no additional expenses other than what we have now.
What is the status of Darien Fest? Is that going to continue or is that falling off?
I'll defer to the mayor.
Darien Fest has had, the Chamber of Commerce has tried several different venues this year. They looked at Hinsdale South High School, the parking lot, the football field, and Clarendon Hills Road. Because of the construction that's going to be taking place this year, the school district begged off and said that would be impossible. They looked at having it at Eisenhower, behind Eisenhower Junior High, closing Park Avenue, putting the rides on Park Avenue, having the tents and everything on the grassy area. School District 61 said no because of the alcohol. They saw that as a problem, even though you'd have the alcohol on the street, which is a public street. They didn't like all that commotion on their property. The chamber looked at Westwood Park, which is the park on the corner of 75th and Fairview. They met with the park district management. The executive board of the park district said no. They said we rent that out for volleyball, for softball, for other types of things that take place at Westwood Park. The only facility that the park district offered the Chamber of Commerce was the parking lot of the Sportsplex, and the chamber doesn't see that as a viable location. So the chamber is currently looking at, if you're familiar with South Frontage Road, we have our Public Works facility, you have Sterling Bay next to it, and next to that is a piece of property, about 12 acres, that's called the Wingren property. The Forest Preserve District owns the Wingren property. They've owned it for about 7 years. About 12,000, was it Dan? About 12,000 square feet of it is available.
That can be utilized, correct?
Can be utilized, because we've talked to them about the possibility of locating Public Works vehicles on that property. They are looking at having Darien Fest on South Frontage Road on this property. And they would ask Sterling Bay if cars could park in the Sterling Bay parking lot, as well as possibly having a trolley service from the shopping center where Q Bar is that would bring people back. What they're waiting for is to determine whether or not Myers Amusement can actually put a ride on dirt versus putting it on asphalt. And when they find that out, then they'll come back to us, and then we got to go to the Forest Preserve District and see if they will allow them to even have it there. If that fails, there won't be a Darien Fest. Although they don't want to say that, but they're really running out of options with regard to locations, and they will continue to try. But this is the best bet right now, is that property on South Frontage Road.
I guess my follow-up question, Brian, would be more for you. Usually with Darien Fest, we have about $12,000 out of pocket, about $16,000, and then they reimburse us based on their profitability in that. So usually we have that in the budget. Do we have anything budgeted for that in the current budget then?
In police overtime, we have a a discretionary item. I think we have 16,000 for police overtime
Okay.
for
if
the
that-
Darien Fest.
So if that doesn't happen, that would be a savings and could be pulled back.
Because I had asked Brian about not realizing that what's happening down the road with Darien Fest, but because then when I saw that, I had asked about, is there going to be an overtime police coverage thing in relating to the special events at Carriage Greens? Is there an impact there? Because, you're going to have a, maybe not Darien Fest size crowd, but you're definitely going to have hopefully a good size crowd.
Good point.
Did you want to respond to that? You didn't think it?
Well,
So if
again, I
that's the
put
case and
a
we have both, then
contingency.
It might not be sufficient even as it is.
The concert events, we anticipate, a couple of hours, 2-3 hours, and obviously not the crowds, not the carnival rides. So it'll be minimal impact on the police on overtime. We would have officers there, but again, on the events, if I built in the $1,000 contingency for the events, that would certainly cover, the overtime for an event, $400 maybe on an event.
Any more discussion on, let's first break off the special events and just talk about the communications, the newsletter, survey, the flyers. So at this point, when we have, obviously some people feel like maybe things could be taken out, things could be reduced. Do I take a consensus vote on that and say keep it as?
In the past, we've done just a quick straw poll, so we might say how many agree to keep in 3 informational flyers, and you could do a quick straw poll with hands up, and then you'll have an indication where the members are on each item.
Okay. Can I have a quick raise of hands if you are in support of keeping 3 informational flyers? Okay. You can't vote. So I saw Ted, Joe, Tom, and Mary.
Okay.
So 4 people.
All right.
Okay. I'm not going to do them all because
Yeah.
I'm just going to do the ones we talked about.
Correct.
The quarterly newsletter. I'm going to start off by a reduction, keeping it at $24,196 for 4 newsletters, one which is 8 pages. Can I have a consensus or a raise of hands of people in support of the $24,196 for 4 newsletters, one being an 8-page? So I got 3 people. Ted, you too? Okay, for that. Okay, so 3 people for that. Can I have a consensus for a quarterly newsletter that would be 4 issues of 4 pages each? So I got Lester, Tom Belzak, Mary, and Tom Klesick. So you didn't vote for the first one. I thought you did vote for the first one.
Oh, I didn't vote for the first one. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. So you want the second one or the first one?
More better,
I
personally,
apologize. I didn't realize what
Yeah,
that you broke that up. So my apologies
Okay.
there.
I'm satisfied with the 4.
So you're satisfied with the 4 newsletters, but less pages. So is that the consensus?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
And then to eliminate the newsletters altogether. Eric doesn't want the newsletters. Okay. So it seems like the consensus is to do the 4-page. Okay. I'll try to reiterate that if I go that route again in explaining it. Okay. So I think, is everyone good on where we're standing then with the Metro Strategies conversation? Okay. So then we're going to go on to the special events. 5 special events. As Brian indicated and Mayor talked about, it's not necessarily concerts, but it's up to 5 special events with a budget of $15,000, and then special event management with a budget of $10,000. Can I have a consent? I'm going to do them individually. So at 5 special events, can I have a consensus for a budget of $15,000? Okay. Lester, you were
Yes.
hand raised? Okay. And then,
How many was that? I didn't count hands. 4? Okay.
4. And then to eliminate doing any special events at Carriage Greens. Is that, everyone else feels none or less amount?
Well, to Alderman Belzak's, point, I wouldn't necessarily go ahead and, knock out budget for 5 of these. We haven't had one yet. We have no idea how it goes. I wouldn't mind going, say, 3 at $3,000 a pop. You're saving $6,000 there. That's my theory.
Tom?
And that's what, I would prefer that.
Right.
Yes.
It's, if we were to plan an event that included music, that takes a little more planning. If we were going to have a fall fest, we didn't have contracts with music or things. So we would, if the council decides on 3, we would, I think, want to just book 3 concerts right away, so we make sure we can get the bands, which would alleviate a fall fest or a winter fest or those other types of things. So if you do limit it to 3, at least what I think we would do then is just try to get a concert series of 3 events, which would eliminate anything else. So
And we would let the numbers that we get this year dictate what we do the following year in the future.
But then you would eliminate the movies on the green, so you're eliminating the little younger kids then if you're just having a band.
we put examples there. As the mayor mentioned, we were thinking maybe 3 concerts and 2 other events. Those 2 other events have not been determined. I don't know that it would be a movie in the park or a movie at the golf course. I don't know if it would be a fall fest, but I know we were pretty solid on 3 because, again, assuming there is a Darien Fest, we wouldn't have a concert maybe that month. So we might do June, July, and then September. But again, because we have to contract with bands.
But there's no stopping other organizations like Lions Club or other groups from planning an event at Carriage Greens and
Correct.
utilizing.
We've asked the Park District to start considering Carriage Greens for events also.
And that would be something they would plan, just
Correct,
using the
because
space.
they have movie night now, they have some concerts, and we tried to, or are trying to develop some kind of a partnership. So why would the Park District want to have a concert over there if we're planning 3 at the golf course? But as of today, we're on our own to do these events.
Did we work together at all to try to coordinate these things so we don't overlap?
Eric, I met with Stephanie Gorgoni, and Stephanie assured me that they'll run at least one band, one concert at Carriage Greens this year.
Okay.
They'll continue to run their movies over at the community park.
Okay, good.
But
Okay.
she and Matt saw an advantage to having at least one concert at Carriage Greens. So we have formed that partnership with them.
Yeah, so I could see you cutting back down on this then. You don't need the 5.
Because if the Park District did a concert, that would be one less concert we would do.
No,
No. So then you'd have 4 concerts?
they would have, and with the Darien Lions Club did Darien Day in the Park, they would have a concert as well. So these other events would take place. We would schedule dates. We're looking at Thursday evenings, not to conflict with Burr Ridge and some of the other communities that have these already. If the Park District did one, they would have to do it. They would have to make arrangements to do it on a night that didn't conflict with us. We're looking at 3 concerts that we would do. If the other organizations do it, they have to they have to actually go through us because we're the ones who have permission to use Carriage Greens. And so we would go to Broderick and say, the Park District wants to do it on this date, but they pay their expenses. They take care of that, not us.
But in the future, if the Park District wanted to have a 3 or 4 concert series, that might take the place of us and we could focus on other things. But again, I'm glad we're getting kind of close now. We're almost into March. That's why this year's a little bit, up in the air because we aren't sure exactly. I don't recall, Mayor, the Park District dates or when they might have their bands there. So, but again, I'm definitely thinking. So if the council wants 3, it would be 3. I believe it would be 3 concerts, and that would be what we would do.
If we did 3, wouldn't special events management drop from 10 to 6,000?
I'm estimating 2,000 an event, so that would also
Go
drop.
hand in hand.
Okay. Because I'd do 3. It would save us 10 grand, correct?
So is there a consensus by the council to do 3 events at Carriage Greens? Can I raise a hands? Okay, so we got 5 out of 7.
I just want to make the comment, we invested heavily in Carriage Greens. They're giving us a good deal, and I think we should take full advantage of it and have 5 events. So it's still holding out for all 5.
Well, I think we kind of shortchange ourselves by saying we're only going to do 3, because if we decided, if we get really great turnout for 3 concerts and we wanted to do an Oktoberfest and we could do an Oktoberfest and we didn't budget for that, then we wouldn't. I would rather have that money there, and if we decide not to do it, then that's money we save. You know, it's like Dan's contingency fees. Dan will put $10,000 in a contingency fee. If we don't spend it, that's $10,000 that we didn't
No,
spend.
he'll put it in our contingency fee.
Well, is there any way if the, say the Park District does do a concert, then we do one less concert and then make, instead of it saying 3 concerts, we say 3 events to be determined. 2 of those events could be concerts. Let's be realistic. We've done nothing, and to think that we're going to have multiple concerts in a month at Carriage Greens, I think that you don't go from having no events to having like an event every week or every other week.
Yeah, but please remember, Mary, that our events will be looking for sponsors. We'll be looking for food trucks to be there, so that we have merchants who will actually make some money on those sales of those items. That's part of the whole idea of doing it, that we want to get Chuck Pines and the different banquet hall guys who have these food trucks an opportunity to sell their food there and make some money on that as well as Mr. Broderick. Park District's not looking to do that. Park District has a concert, they sell popcorn. That's all they do. So I wouldn't say let's cancel one if they do one, because they could come back and tell us, let's be honest, they said they would commit to 1. They may come back and say they're not going to do anything now.
And you made a good point that I want to make it clear, that, Mayor, that I did not include in here. If there are sponsorships, that's above and beyond any of this. So if April were to come on and work out sponsorships, there's no plan for that at this point, but it's likely there would be some revenue from sponsorships. Right. But Mayor, you talked to April, you know more about that aspect than I do, but there's a likelihood that there would be some money in for sponsorships.
If you jump on the Village of Hinsdale's website, and they have their Uniquely Thursday in downtown Hinsdale, and they have Clarendon Hills has Dancing in the Streets.
Yep. And
both of their websites, up in the right-hand corners are, right there looking for sponsors, and they're looking for sponsors right now for those events in the summer.
Yep. And they would probably get those. Me personally, I'm always cautious about asking any business in town for a sponsorship, being the government. But that's why I think we're in a better position where April could do that, more part of the business community. So that might cover the events. I'm not sure at this point, and maybe that's what we do. If we get, if the council's set on 3 and we end up getting sponsorships for $2,000 or $5,000, we could add that maybe a 4th or 5th is another option.
I was going to make the comment and agree with Alderman Schauer a few years ago with regards to Darien Fest. When we were looking at cutting it, I believe you made the comment on how families and everyone comes out here and you get your name Darien out because of Darien Fest. So for you might not have Darien Fest, these festivals and films might be our Darien Fest and our ability to get our city name and the word out there. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, Tom. Not necessarily because Darien, but I go back to what Ted said. Darien Fest is critical because Darien Fest, it provides something for the community. And these concerts would provide something for the community.
Especially if someone's looking for housing or somewhere to move out from the city. So.
Well, and when will we know what the status is with Darien Fest? When will that be?
Probably going to know in about a week or so. If they find out that they can put the rides on the ground, then the next step is to go to the Forest Preserve executive board and see if they could use that facility. They could turn around and say, no, you can't use that facility. Right. We met with the Forest Preserve people. We had them in. We had their consultant as well as Linda Painter. And but we were dealing strictly with public works in terms of additional parking space. This would be a whole new discussion for the Forest Preserve. I suggested this to April. They went over and they actually looked at the site. And right now, Myers Amusement is looking as to whether or not they could put rides on the ground. And Dan also figured out that in a heavy rain event, not all 12,000 of those square feet are going to be above water. I mean, there's some of it that is wetland.
Actually, 12,000 square feet would be okay.
Would be okay.
Everything outside of that envelope, there's the potential.
Right.
Yeah.
But, Mary, a lot of things can change.
Right. Well, I
I
just
would
think
pla-
that could possibly, and I don't know, I'm just speculating, have an impact on maybe some of the decisions of the aldermen if there was no Darien Fest. Would they look at this differently in terms of community events? And there's also a budgetary impact if there is no Darien Fest, then we know we don't have that expense on the police overtime that, that frees up those funds too to help subsidize the events at Carriage Greens. I think you need a variety of events to appeal to all populations of the community.
I think that the Chamber of Commerce will work their tail ends off to have a Darien Fest. They even mentioned to me that they might they might form an alliance with another community like Lamont or something like that has a downtown area, and we would go in with them and have our Darien Fest with them in Lamont. I know that sounds crazy, but they're running out of locations. We just don't have those locations in Darien. I think they'd work hard not to not have a Darien Fest.
Well, I think I'm sensing that some people would like to hold off making like a firm decision on this, and if we could revisit this item, maybe once we get maybe a little bit more information on Darien Fest. Is that possible to come back to this?
I would be in favor of tabling this to.
I think I would, if I were an elected official, I would plan, and plan for this because it's community events, that there will be no Darien Fest. I think that's the safest bet for the community. But if the council wanted to reduce it to 3, all I'm saying is I would want to start those 3 now and plan those for 3 concerts so we can start booking bands. I haven't done that in years, planned special events, and April does it now, but you can't always just, book immediately. And it might take some time. So if we hold off this discussion and we hold it off another month and then the budget passes, it's another month, I'm afraid we just won't have any bands. Dan and I will be playing guitar and we won't have anybody there.
I do sing now.
Well, I think there's a consensus to do at least 3 events.
Okay, so, yeah.
I mean, am I understanding the council's opinion that we agree to do 3 events? But some of us feel that we should do more, and if Darien Fest truly doesn't happen, perhaps others will feel that way.
Let me just say this, all right? This is our first year rolling this out, okay? I say we go with 3 right off the bat. If they go terrific, then we would be dumb not to have a 4th and a 5th. And we're talking a situation, every dollar counts, I get it. But we're also talking the fact that it's a $5,000 per event, and you have a contingency for $5,000. We'd never use that. The point I'm trying to make is...
10,000, but...
Yeah, but 10,000. But the point is if it's rocking and rolling and the people in the city of Darien like it, we're going to go ahead and pass another 2, and we're going to figure out how to get another 10,000. I'll be realistic. But we don't know how it's going to be. We don't know. We don't know what the costs are going to be on it. That's my concern.
And my only point is if it's 3 events, I think the staff should be let loose to start booking 3 events for the bands. And figure if we're going to have 3 events, we would have the June, July, and September. And we'll memorialize this in some information to the council if that is tentatively approved. I just want to make sure we're starting to book bands, and if this is all approved, I want to make sure I have to get something ironed out with April and get that rolling, because that would be the first step. If the council wants 3, and I would bring something back to approve an agreement with April, and then we could really get rolling on even the 3.
Okay. Do I have a consensus to approve the staff to go ahead with planning for 3 special events with special events management support? Do we have that consensus? Can I have a raise a hand?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So everyone supports 3, and then we'll possibly later in the budgeting process see if there wants to be more, but we know we've got 3 right now. Okay?
Got it.
Good. Okay. So moving on to, and then there was a consensus. We already had the consensus on the newsletter. Going down to training and education for $1,500. Any discussion? Travel meetings? Okay. Moving on to page 13. We've got some telephone, utilities, Then moving on to contractual services.
One item under contractual services, we had the website upgrades in this budget for 5,000, but the council approved that last night, so we'll be taking that out for the 5,000, making that 0. And then in the, this year's estimated expenses, we'll move the, what was approved as 3,900, so that'll come out of next year.
I got a quick question for you. Under contractual, under our budget for last year, we were at 541, but we came in at 333. Any idea why?
What last year? You mean the audited year?
Yeah, fiscal year ending 20, budgeting. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Sterigenics, okay.
The
Oh,
200,000
got it.
Gotcha. Thanks, Michael.
Okay. Are you talking about the consulting services?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
It was the money that we put in for the
Right,
Sterigenics.
because we budgeted 200,000 and we never used it, which
Okay,
is
so
great.
now I'm bringing us back to contractual services 10-4325. There is supporting documentation. If you look for computer support and computers and parts, which you can find on page 21. Discussion on those items. 21, 22, 23.
When's the last time this has gone out for bid for the server management? Is this something we put out?
Well,
for-
I maybe think a few years ago, we had AIS for a few years, and we went out to bid and stayed with AIS. So, I mean, the plan we have with them is a factor of what we want. So we, early on, we just did hourly and on an ad-needed basis, and a few years back, we switched to a kind of a fixed monthly fee for them to come out and give us a certain amount of hours. So it's been a few years, and it's.
So what are we getting, what are they doing for the server management? What does that entail? So that's $61,000. It seems like a lot of money. I mean, are they out here once a month?
For the which amount for the?
104325. Oh, I'm sorry. Third middle.
Yeah, there's computer support and then there's parts and.
The backup behind the computer support.
Yeah, on page
Yeah,
21.
I'm not. I just don't have that in my.
Page
I don't have the
21,
backup
21.
right here. Oh,
Page 21.
It's
yeah,
just-
that explains the amount for the fixed monthly. Yeah, I'm not sure your specific question. I mean,
Well, it just
I don't
seems high. I
remember.
wasn't sure what, I just wondering, I mean, how
it's a
much?
block of hours we get, and we use all the hours. We typically are over a few, and it's really ongoing maintenance, server work, upgrades of the systems, or replacing computers, and we break that out separately from our computer replacement. So we'll do an annual replacement, which is that second line of computers and parts for 82,000. So we break that out. And that's more almost like.
So if someone has a problem with their computer, are these folks involved with that, or are they
Yes.
just?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
because it's more than just the server management
Oh,
then?
yeah, I'm sorry, yes, it's all of our computers, it's as if we had an employee that would take care of all the
Okay.
computers, the software, the hardware.
Yeah, maybe we just need to expand
Well, up in the
on
top, it says,
description.
provide the managed professional services, including the help desk and maintenance, 32 hours per month, along with backup security for the city, which also includes SCADA. For instance, as an example, I was having challenges with my email, my Darien email. It stopped loading on my phone, my iPad, my computer, and they spent quite a bit of time with me trying to resolve it.
Yeah, the service,
I just
we're
went
happy
to
with the
Lisa. She
services,
fixed
so
it.
that's not an issue.
Lisa couldn't get it to
And
work.
when we went out to bid, the prices were fair, and that was not an issue,
Okay.
so.
Didn't we have the bid on this
Mine
about
had to
3
do
years
with
ago?
Comcast.
Because
I think it was about
Renco was doing all the
Okay.
work, and we
Well,
said,
Yeah, it was
because
about
we
3
don't-
years, it was
Okay.
about 3 years ago, and that's when we went to this managed, block of
Okay.
time.
right.
So you feel we're getting our money's worth?
Oh, yeah, no, we're
Okay,
very happy
that's-
in getting our money's worth.
Okay.
I'm working on three different documents here, so I was just trying to find
No,
what you were
that's-
looking at, Eric. That's why I was hesitating.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we feel comfortable we're actually getting, our money out of it. Because I've seen some times where you don't.
Brian, to me, $50,000 for a server upgrade is pretty expensive, considering that hardware today is pretty inexpensive. But $50K for replacement of hardware and software, I think that's kind of steep, just based on what I've experienced in the industry. That's something we should look at.
Well, I would, that expense as an example anything, and that's a good point, could have brought up earlier, anything that you're looking at now over $5,000 comes back to the city council again.
Yeah.
So if our server needs to be replaced or our phone system, that will come back to the council for further review. So in terms of the expenses, we do rely on them to go out and search for the equipment and go out and buy the equipment, and most of that I believe is in the labor cost, where you might vary, but I think the equipment's pretty easy to verify, at least costs when we get to that in terms of the server.
And that's being stored in the back, right? In the back room here? Or where's the servers being stored?
I don't recall, is that the one in the PD now? Yeah, it's at the PD in the
That's
back
just
there.
one server?
There,
Just
yes,
one? Yeah.
yes.
Have we looked into hiring a full-time network engineer? Because it seems like it would be cheaper to get a full-time network engineer to support our services and applications and stuff from my perspective.
Yeah, I've
you know.
seen those positions advertised, and with pay and benefits, I think that would be more expensive, because if you had a full-time employee, we'd still have the hardware and software expenses. You'd still have to buy all those things.
Mhm.
So you end up spending, at least what I've seen in there, 75 minimum salary, and I've seen those jobs from 75 to 100, and that doesn't include all the benefits, the health insurance and all that, and all the other time off and all those things. So I think we're better off with a consultant for that. And it's similar to, engineering work. Some of this work we have, instead of hiring a staff person, we're better off, because you get, we don't have the same tech every time. So you have a number of people. So if we had an employee and they're off for 2 weeks on vacation, then we'd end up still having to have the same needs. So I'm
get it,
happy with what we have. And again, in terms of the prices on hardware, if we go out and buy something, more than a laptop or whatever, we do come back to the council, and you'll get a much better review at that time when we've actually identified everything.
Do we buy refurbished laptops, or are these brand new laptops?
We've been buying new, as I recall, but
It's about $1,700 a piece.
and I will tell you, the AIS representative was going to come tonight, and I told him to not come tonight because I wasn't sure we would be at the meetings, but he'd be more than happy to come out to the council if there's more questions on our computer support or any of that, come to a meeting and answer any of the questions directly from him.
And in the packet, the supporting documentation that goes along with all this is their full, their agreement, their schedule, their explanation of services, their hourly billing rate. All of that is in the pages following this.
Yeah, I've done most of this stuff on this checklist.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much like hitting a button and just beep. So it's pretty.
Not for us, it's not.
Yeah.
Next time we hit a button, the whole thing's shut. But, that's what I was actually looking for, Mary, thanks. That backup, because that does give much more detail, I think, to Eric's question about what they do and what we get for the services.
And it also gives us the multi-year plan as well.
Yeah.
3-year plan is in here.
Yeah, we look at all of our equipment in 3-year increments, like we do, Dan's vehicles and all other equipment.
Right, so it helps to have that in there as reference.
The only problem I have is the $50,000 price tag. It just looks like a server is $50,000, and it's not itemized the way it should be. That's all.
And
It just looks
we
that
get
way,
more
like
on
it's
that.
$50,000 for a
So-
server.
Lester, you'd like to see more of a breakdown on that $50,000. It'd
Yeah.
be defined more about what that includes besides a piece of equipment, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And do we see that anywhere? I didn't think I did in the backup.
Page 33
33?
at the top. in 2021. It kind of breaks it down a little bit. I don't know if that's as detailed as
So
you
it talks
want,
about, well, it's got the Microsoft licensing estimate.
Yeah, that's a better breakdown where you have.
Yeah, and then you've got the
licensing.
hardware and additional software and labor.
So it's 36.
36 plus 14 for the
14.
licensing, which is a one-time expense.
So again, for budgeting purposes, this was, good enough for us. Again, recognizing it'll come back since it's over $5,000.
Everyone still reading this, or is there a consensus?
So what was the answer to Gustafson's question? I think he asked if we outbidded it to other companies as well, or no? I guess I didn't catch that. He asked the question if we had other
That's a
quotes.
competitive bid.
Correct.
Yeah, it's like 3 years ago.
Yeah, and it's been, I recall a few years ago, we had AIS, they were they came in first on RFPs, and then we went back for RFPs a few years back and re-upped with them as our consultant. So
So is it worth just having a second quote to compare to? Just to do the ballpark? Or just
Well,
budgeted
we-
temporarily
we-
for now?
it's one of those things that if you develop a relationship with a company and they've been good, I mean, it's pretty easy to check prices. The one thing, I'll get calls periodically from computer service consulting firms, and, the prices sometimes because they could find the documents. Everything we do is accessible. So you'll get people find that and say, oh, I could do that for $5, a little bit cheaper. Well,
Yeah, I mean, my manager will ask that work on a project, say, okay, we have that relationship with your customer, but is it worth $4,000? He'd say, yeah. If it's worth $20,000, he'd say no. So I think that's where I'd get challenged at work and say, I have the same situation that we're in, or we're looking at now that, you have a customer I've worked on, a supplier for many, many years. You have the relationship, they're really good. How much additional is considered that relationship? Is it a couple thousand, or is it 20,000, as my manager would say to me? So I guess that's where I'm probably asking the question is, if someone comes back at 30,000, then the question is $20,000 worth the relationship, or if it's, 45,000, 50, most of us would probably say close enough. But if it's a big difference, then that's what the.
Well, when we looked a few
the
years
question
ago,
would be.
the price was worth it, and they were selected again. So, again, on professional services, I definitely would not want to go every year and look for a new computer consultant and have everybody fight
Doing
$5 or
right.
$10 each way, and then, have to justify somebody who was $5 more. So we're satisfied, but ultimately that's up to the council, but we're happy with their services and have felt their prices were competitive.
So every 3 years, then we've quoted 4 years, 5. I mean, yeah, I agree. Every year we probably shouldn't. If it's been like 4 or 5 years,
There's no
then-
requirement per se.
No,
There's
we
a-
don't,
it's
we
just-
didn't, it's not like sometimes we'll go for auditing bids and it's 3 years, or it's similar, to some degree, like our engineer or our attorney. You have certain professional services that end up working with you, and, primarily if the services was not acceptable, I'd be the first one back coming to the council, kicking them out and getting other services. And again, in terms of the rates, they were competitive, so that's.
Okay. So I mean, I'd be fine going one more year, and then probably next year looking at how are they're competitive in general. This has been 3 years, and then maybe next year look at what that would be. But for now, I'd probably be fine.
Okay.
Okay, so under contractual services, is there a consensus by the council to support the recommended amount of $363,233? Can I have a raise of hands? Okay, I think everybody's good with that. Okay. Moving on to item 10-4330, contingency for $10,000.
Banny gets 10K, what the heck?
I'm the only one who never spends anything out of there.
Can
I've
you,
had that in there for how many years? We haven't changed it.
I'll use it.
Let's move it to the events.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Move it to the events
Mike,
page.
what's been spent last year on that?
What's our account number?
10-4330.
10-4330.
it's the contingency, so it's just a contingency.
Yeah, I mean, at $14 million,
10-4330.
$14 million budget, you're not going to hit everything square.
Year-to-date is 450 out of the 10,000.
Oh, darn it.
Okay.
We got 4 months left. We'll
Yeah.
we'll
Don't
get
tell
through
Dan
that.
The contingency.
You know, the computer upgrades last night, we had charged to that, and I'm not sure if the conference fees would have been charged to that. I'll have to check, but we typically run,
Well, this last year, we took some of the Heart of Darien Award out of there too, I think.
yeah. So
I
if
mean-
we were running at 10 every year, I'd probably have to ask for 20. So I think 10 was always a reasonable number.
Yeah, I mean, the year before, I think you used 5 or 6 for something, 5 or 6,000 from what I remember, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's
just one of those
it's
things that,
unanticipated
you know.
expenses that come up, so. It's,
Everyone okay with that? Can I have a raise of hands? Okay. Janitorial services, 1,000. For miscellaneous cleaning. For a total of 19,500. Can I have a consensus for janitorial services? 19.5? Okay. Building improvements, nothing. Any discussion with that? Going to pardon?
No, talking to Lester, sorry.
Okay. Equipment 10-4815 for cable room maintenance, 5,000. Everyone okay with that? Okay. So for a total of, we are taking out the 5,000 for website upgrades. So everyone else okay with everything else we see on this administrative department summary page?
So to be clear, the changes we made were the quarterly newsletter is 19,404, and the special events are 9, and the special events management is 6. Is that were those the only changes we did?
Yeah, so we reduced the quarterly newsletter to 19,404, as noted, Tom Belzak, and we right now have green-lighted 3 special events with special events management support for 3. So that reduces it. Got 6,000 on the special events management.
5,000 on the computer. Web upgrade.
Now, do I need to give a total number? No.
no,
We'll
I'll
take care of it
yeah.
later.
Okay. Does anyone need to take a bathroom break, get a snack, anything like that? Okay, go ahead and do that real quick. Snacks and waters in the kitchen.
At my age, I don't ask permission anymore.
Got up and went.
employees, and it's hard to be every employee's, best alderman, best manager, and also be that employee's best friend. And that's hard because I know a lot of city employees as well. And I've lived here a long time. I sent out an email to the members of the budget committee earlier today, and I took a quick look at the budgets. I used to work as an accountant, even forensic accounting, all that. So I'm pretty familiar with them. And one thing I noticed is that page 3, it said there were no material changes to the budget. I would disagree with that assertion. For example, when I looked at the police budget, you're going from 7,877 budget to 8,3 forecast next year budget. That's 5.7% in an environment where CPI this year was 2%. So you're 3 times CPI, 300%. If you weren't in government, if you were in the corporate world, where 62% of your budget was going up at 300% times the rate of CPI, it would be a challenge that you'd probably be asked to solve. If you go for the estimate at 7.787 forecast for this year, with again that 8.3 million number, that represents 6.9% increase. And I'm sure there's reasons for that. And I would say most of them you entirely control because if it's benefits, salary, overtime, uniforms, cars, gas, you sign that contract. This body votes. 4 votes, you sign it. So you have nobody to blame but yourselves, in my opinion. And, there's a lot of different dials to that. For example, a lot of your large corporations, CPI was 2%. Their merit increase pool is 1.9%. Yeah, it sucks to be me, but, that's it. It's your job. If you don't like that job, you find another one, and you lose good people and people do it right. But, my health care, again, it got hammered this year, increased deductibles, want to put you in an HMO. And again, you make the decision. It may not be the job you want, but it's the job you have. And if the other aspects of it are good enough, then, it was a tough year for most people. So I would just say that. I mean, you look at the big number and, Treasurer, goodness, I've known you 35 years. Corn. Sorry, it's public speaking's hard, which is probably why I'm the only one here. So I apologize, Treasurer Cord. So I would look at that, and then the last thing that really caught my attention was the $20,000 to algicide the Darien Lake. I call it. It's hard to find. I don't even know if it has a name. I just call it Darien Lake because Darien owns it. But I almost bought a house behind there, 1929 Manning Road, and it's a really cool area. And, I sent 15 points of, I went back there. I hiked through it. And I don't know if anybody here's been back there to take a look. But I just urge you, I'm not going to go through them all this evening. Thank you for the time to speak. But take a look at the points I made. And given your discussions today, make an informed decision. I would urge you to remove that from consideration by consensus or formal vote. But
And not to interrupt, that's not in the budget, just so you know.
I thought
I
when
didn't
I
want to cut you off,
looked,
but that there's a number of items that are there's background in the budget, but if you go to the page with the numbers, there's nothing in there.
for that page 71, it had a street, a number 2, I can't remember, it was
No,
referenced.
but if you go to the number part of the budget, because what we do on this preparatory budget is we'll put all the numbers together, and if there's backup on things, we'll put an asterisk, but not everything that's identified in the numbers portion by a name has money allocated. So on something like that, it was a request that came through, and it was denied, so it's not in the budget.
Oh, it was denied.
Yeah,
I
I did not put that in there as suggested, but I always put the department head's background in there or request, so the city council has a better understanding of what transpired between the department head and myself.
Was that denial a matter of record by vote of this body or by you as the senior administrator and
No,
your
it's
peers?
in the draft budget, so everything's up for the council consideration. But the mayor and I prepared the draft budget for the city council to consider. So
Okay.
the budget,
If you look at the bottom of that page,
yeah.
Yeah.
it says recommended by city administrator. There's a yes and a no box. It's checked no.
Yeah, so we prepare for the council, and the council takes all those, and they'll make final.
Yeah, when I saw it, it wasn't recommended though. I thought that zoning committee doesn't recommend something, the body votes. Not to say they can care less, but the only vote that counts is this body and municipal committee. Whatever. So when I saw that no, I didn't know that was
just not the
binding
draft.
on this body.
It's not binding. It could, the council could recommend it.
Well, I took a
Yeah.
couple hours today to check it out for myself, and I did a lot of research. So I'm grateful that.
Thank you for your email on that too, and your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Kelly, if you don't mind, I'd like to address one of your concerns. No, you don't have to come back up. But I think this might be helpful for even anybody in the audience that can't find
minutes
anything
are up.
better to watch on TV. But in terms of the police budget, you're talking about, where the increases are, salaries, benefits, and everything. What most people aren't aware is the police they're not allowed to strike, so they're subject to binding arbitration. So they will present us with their proposal on a contract, we'll present them with ours. If we can't reach an agreement, an arbitrator is assigned. The problem we live in the western suburbs of Chicago, or rather affluent, and they say, they look at our budget, they look at our fund balances and everything, you can afford to pay that. An arbitrator will take one side or the other. They won't take, the police are asking for 3%, we're offering 1%. They won't come and do 2%. They'll choose either the 3 or the 1. So that's the risk you run. So our hands are tied a little bit in that context, that in terms of, and when I first started here in 2007, we had 39 sworn officers. We did do an analysis at that time, a needs-based analysis, and we did reduce the head count to, 34 now, I believe, Brian? So we did reduce that by 5 to try and impact that. But unfortunately, we do live in an area where we would probably lose the arbitrations for the most part, so usually we're able to come up with consensus, and I think the last contract we did has an average of about 2.5% salary increases, if I'm remembering the numbers right, so it's not horrendous, but it does tie our hands to a certain extent that we can't just play hardball and say, okay, you guys want to go out on strike, go ahead, because again, it's subject to binding arbitration since they're not allowed to strike, and then we throw our hands in an arbitrator, and we have no control over
And
that
that's pay and
ourselves.
benefits, Mike, too.
Yeah.
So, if we just can't say to the police employees, now you're going to pay 40% for your health.
And this is for the benefit of the new aldermen, too. I'm
Right.
not sure whether you were aware
Well,
of
the
that.
only way to reduce it would be reduce the number of
Reduce
officers.
the
Right,
head count,
reduce in
exactly,
force,
which we
yes.
did before.
you'd have to do.
And if that's what we need to do, that's the way we
Mike-
would be able to make an
Michael,
impact on that.
from what I remember, they also look at comparables. They'll look at Downers Grove, they'll look at other communities.
That's what I'm saying. That's why an arbitrator
right,
would
that's-
generally lose that, because most of the areas around us are fairly affluent and able to pay. So if Downers Grove is paying their guys 70,000 and we're offering our guys, I'm totally pulling numbers out of the air here. If they're paying them 70,000 and we're offering 60,000, the arbitrator's going to say, oh, Downers, and you're all similar community. You've got the assets and the reserves, therefore you're going to pay the 70,000.
Well, I would submit a couple points. You mentioned that your fund balance is in great shape, so they'll give the money. Well, maybe the answer is,
I didn't hear that.
no, you said that. You said they look at your fund balance and it's in great shape and they think you can afford it. Then certainly that's one of the things the arbitrator would look at. And,
Well, I don't mean to get a debate, but.
I think
just
he was
wanted to
saying
talk-
hypothetically. I think that's what Mike was saying.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at it, I mean, even Moody's did a reevaluation of us, and they say relative to most communities in Illinois, and they compare us, that we have been fairly conservative, believe it or not. Not as conservative as I would like, as you can probably tell by a lot of my discussion. I mean, I'd like to take it the next step, but again, we need a certain base of police. This is where the aldermen have to decide. Do we need 39? Can we do it 34? Can we go to 32? Again, that's at their direction. But the numbers themselves, our hands are tied somewhat.
yeah, I wouldn't advocate necessarily a reduction in force. The only point I'm trying to make is that it's 62% of your spend. You're talking a bond issue, a tax increase. Now the residents can backdoor referendum you and, shoot that down. Who knows? But, what's important to note is that this current rate of 5.7%, it's unsustainable.
I hear you. That's why
Kel-
you were here for my first part of my discussion.
Kel-
I just
Kelly,
took
just
down that road.
to put this in perspective, and this is one of the arguments that I've had for 10 years, okay, as an alderman, is that we have our pension that's going from 1.7 million to 1.905 this year. And how the pension works is basically we have an actuarial that basically comes to us and says this is what you need to put into your pension. Now we can turn around and fund that at 90%, which is the state allows us. But Michael has always been a true advocate, and I've always backed him up because I agree. We always fund it at 100%. The problem is the actuarial will turn around and will basically say, this is what we got to put into it. And now we could go out and hire our own actuarial and see if that number is correct, but then we're going to have to spend another $7,000 or $8,000 because we want to get to that level to make sure our pension is going to be eventually fully funded. The issue is, and you brought it right up, when I started as an alderman in 2009, we were doing 1.1 million. We are now at 1.9 million. We're going to go to 2.3 million in 2 years. You're right, it's unsustainable. You're basically outpacing inflation by 4 times. That's the reality. And I wish I had an answer for you. I don't. That's the problem that goes with it. So
Even funding it at 100%, which the council's been gracious enough funded at that, our police pension is only funded at approximately 60%, even after all these years of funding at that 100%. The one potential glimmer of hope anyway that I have there is Pritzker had the consolidation of the downstate, were considered downstate police pension funds. So all the assets will be taken, invested, and a statewide actuary will be doing the calculation instead of an actuary doing one for Downers Grove, one for Darien, one for Willowbrook. So there'll be a lot more consistency in the assumptions because every year this actuary comes by, they change life expectancies, they change different variables that, again, like Ted said, I mean, we've talked about hiring our own actuary to do it, but now you're going to spend $7,000 on hiring that actuary to do it.
And it's a gamble. We don't know if it's going to be right or high or lower.
Funded, so
Right.
you're better off taking that $7,000 and putting it against your future obligation.
Well, as Alderman Schauer noted, it's that one promise, and you made a promise, that one benefit is 18% of your budget.
No question. And it's totally out of our control.
That's
Okay.
the issue. Yeah, I mean, think about this, to go from 1.1 million in 11 years to 1.9, now it could even be a little bit less than that. You're almost going up, 85%, 4 times inflation per year. And it's, everybody sits here and like, how can we sustain it? We can't. But all we do is, as elected officials, the best way we can is basically say we're going to continue to fund it, what we need to do per the government, per the state, and take care of it, and make sure that the people that are listening on the cameras saying this is what we're doing. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's 5.7%. If you take a look at it, it's going to continue to go like that. And you're right. The only way we're going to do it, and I said this basically, 10 years ago, if you want to turn around and cut this thing down, we get rid of 10 police officers. Then you're going to turn into the problem you're going to turn into the problem that's going to happen in Willowbrook, where they didn't have enough people to cover it, for 3 or 4 years, and you have the issues with it. You can't cut police, safety and security. So we're kind of, sometimes we say we're kind of stuck with our hands tied on some of these things.
I would go to arbitration. What do you have to lose? You're in a bad place. You're unsustainable. Go to arbitration. You can't conceivably do any worse. But thank you for the time, Chairman Sullivan.
Thank you. And we'll be talking about the police budget next Tuesday when Chief is here, but we are doing our due diligence to discuss and plan ahead for what we know we have to deal with
But Alderwoman,
moving
I'm
forward.
sorry.
Kelly,
But
it's a good point you brought up. Well, seriously.
You and I talked earlier today, coincidentally, I think, because what was just said here, I know social media there's going to be article, we're cutting police officers.
Yeah, we're not
We're
cutting
not.
police officers.
We're not.
We're not.
Yeah.
I've had
Whoever
multiple
watching, whoever in the
people
audience,
reach out to
we're-
me. I heard you're cutting police officers,
Yeah.
and we are not
We
cutting
are
our
not. And
force.
that already came out, and I can imagine when we're done, I go home and have a pizza, and I'm looking at social media, I'll see a number of comments related to that. That's nowhere in a 3-year plan, and the chief could cover staffing, and we're We're perfectly staffed, and just in defense of Willowbrook, I don't know what Willowbrook issue was, and
Yeah, we're
I don't
talking
wanna-
10 years ago.
yeah, I don't
you
want
know,
to. I don't.
so-
I don't
Yeah.
want to mislead people in Willowbrook because that will travel too.
Yeah.
I'm expecting to see a quote that Alderman Shower said Willowbrook's none of that. That's part
Right.
of discussion. And thanks. I
Guys,
wanted
I'm
to
just,
clarify
for
that.
the people that are home and for anybody who's wanting to put out on social media, Brian said it, we're not going to cut police in any way, shape, or form. There's no intention. We're just basically making the statement that a lot of these costs that are coming through, like the pension, is basically a set in stone because somebody is determining this, and this is what's going on with the state. We had a situation back with Willowbrook 10 years ago, which has nothing to do with the city of Darien, but yeah, they did let some police go, all right? They downsized. We're not doing it in the city of Darien, and Willowbrook, I'm not sure they're not doing it now, so make sure that's out there on social media and everybody else who wants to listen.
I think the other thing that, Kelly, to keep in mind is one of the reasons we supported pension consolidation is that it's going to provide more aggressive investment at the state level, whereas where communities like Darien, who are doing well in terms of funding at 100%, will continue to see growth in terms of their investment. You have communities that are not funding 100% every year. And then you have small communities that can't afford to be aggressive in their investment. When their money is consolidated at the state level can't, through similar to IMRF, they can be more aggressive in terms of the return they will get. It's just one of the reasons we supported that. There'll be one actuary for the state next year for the police pension fund and for the fireman's pension fund. And we're expecting to see more growth. But Alderman Shower is correct, Treasurer Corrin's correct, that those costs will continue to rise. And we need to meet those costs because public safety is critical in the city of Darien. But at the same time, municipal services is critical in the city of Darien, as are all the other services.
Thank you.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not scapegoating the men and women in blue. They do a great job. They keep us safe. I was just making a simple accounting point.
Thank you. And I think we all are in agreement that public safety and public services continue always to be a top priority for us as public servants, I can't speak anymore, to our constituents in Darien. Okay, would love to get through the last item for the evening, which is Community Development Department. We are looking at page number 36. Okay, and salaries, benefits, operating costs, contractual capital.
Alderwoman, I'm sorry, if one on the cover page, just one correction I'll need to make.
Okay.
Under the fiscal year 20 estimated actual, if you go down to the economic incentives, that was understated, and that number I'm changing to 351,500. The payment to Walmart did increase this year, so I have to adjust that number.
Can you repeat that one more time?
For what year is that?
For the fiscal year ending 20 estimated actual.
So it's 351,000.
500.
351,500.
Okay. But you're still going with 501,500 for fiscal year 21 request.
And that's correct, because that should be including the where the old Phillips 66 was at, right?
Yeah, I've been.
Yeah, the 150,000
Yes.
for the corner at Brookhaven.
I would argue that number going forward is a little bit light because
Yeah.
all Brian's doing is adding 150,000 to the 351. And our Walmart incentive, they get any increase in their sales tax, and their sales tax has been increasing steadily
Yeah.
since we did that incentive. So I would think that the amount that we're going to owe them next year will be somewhat higher. I don't know how much higher, but it will be somewhat higher. So
Yeah, on my sheet, Mike, I adjusted that for the Walmart payment in fiscal year 22 to 300 and fiscal year 23 to 330.
Okay, good.
But if the payment's higher, that means they're paying higher sales tax.
Well, that's
So
already
their sales
included-
tax
that-
goes up.
That's already included
So
in our
one's
first
in-
discussion on the sales.
But
tax.
aren't they in line with each other? So isn't the one based on the other? I mean, isn't the
Yes,
rebate
but-
based upon the sales tax that's in the top
Remember our
number?
first discussion, how sales tax is actually down this year?
Right,
From our
right.
projections? but
Just
so
not
it's an
from Walmart.
overall.
It's
I mean,
not
if-
from
if what
Walmart.
you suggested that businesses are closing, it could be down because of them, and yet Walmart could be going up, and the others could
Okay.
be going down. And I think that's more likely the scenario that we're seeing, especially with Walmart starting that drive-up
Right,
pickup
Walmart's
groceries and
doing more
everything.
business.
Yeah.
Others are
That
I
would
haven't
be
not
my-
seen,
doing
that
as
would
much.
I
be
haven't
my
seen anybody at
expectation.
the door yet.
Okay.
Bigger
let's
that
start-
number,
let's-
the better, though,
Okay,
still.
let's first,
Brian,
thanks-
yeah, can you, how many employees are in this department? And what are their responsibilities? I just want to get a flavor of how many people and what they all do.
For community development,
Yeah,
you want me to do that, Brian?
Well, I got the spreadsheet, I don't.
yeah.
We have Mary Belmonte, who
Okay.
does all the permits, and
Okay.
social media coordinator,
Okay,
Dan Gombach,
okay.
and Joe Hedderfine,
Oh,
our
okay.
city planner. And that's
Okay,
That's
this
what
is
comes
where
out
all
of
those
that
folks
budget.
go. Yeah, I
Yes.
just didn't realize they
Yeah.
weren't there. Okay,
paid out of water, right?
streets and water.
And part out of water. Gotcha.
okay,
Yeah, some employees will split, like Chris and
okay.
a couple of clerical staff.
All right, thank you.
Mary?
Yes.
I'm going to slow this down a little more, sorry.
Okay.
Still on the cover page.
No.
But just a couple other things. I did discuss these with Brian previously, and he highlighted the most significant one. But I also suggested that he take a look at the Social Security numbers going out to 3 years. They look to be a little bit light, not at the 6.2%. The other thing is the IMRF contribution. You see it's at 37,000 and then rises to 38 and 39,000. I don't know if you were able to update that for their new rate, Brian. That number goes up and down. The rate that they charge us goes up and down depending on their investment performance. They're based on a December 31st year end. Our current rate, the new rate that we're going into is 12.85%, Brian, I believe. And I don't think these numbers, I think these numbers are just a little bit light in terms of that.
Well, I think, yeah, it's formula based. We just take the salaries, any overtime, merit, and multiply it by the AMRF. But I'll double check all the pension
Double check,
stuff
'cause that's
before.
sort of what I did. I took 12.85, so that may be a little different. And then lastly, on the consulting professional reimbursement, the last line there, projecting $68,000 estimated actual. It's at $69,533, so it's already over that number as of January with a few more months to go.
So Mike, just going back to you feel that the amount that's in there for Social Security and IMRF is low?
Well, I want Brian to check it.
Okay.
It may be.
That
it may
he,
not be.
okay, and you'll
I
check
think
that,
the
Brian,
social-
and,
Yeah, I mean, I have the, for IMRF, I know I have the 12.85%, but because it's an Excel spreadsheet, I'll fine tune all those, and we always double check those as we've had some more payrolls and things. Yeah, I'll verify all
Okay.
those and double check.
It's not going to be anything dramatic. I
No,
mean,
but
they
that's
may be
things
off
to
a few
point out.
$1,000, but they just want them to
Okay.
tighten it up a little bit.
Eric, did you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, no problem. So we'll start on the summary page 36 and start at the top and work our way down. I think we got the answer on salaries. We talked about, Mike brought up Social Security and IMRF. Any other questions under salaries and benefits? Okay, moving on, operating. Dues and subscriptions, liability insurance. Moving on to page 37.
I guess if I
Yes.
could slow it down one more time. I don't know if it's worth discussing, Brian. When Alderman Podorowski was here, I know we discussed, right now, we have our deductibles. We've got our deductibles set at $2,500. I know back several years ago, we looked at possibly increasing them to $5,000. That would save some on the premium, although expose us a little bit more on the dollar amount. I don't know if that's worth going back.
Staff looks at that every year because at renewal time, Irma sends us a questionnaire if we'd like to look at the deductibles, and they show us what it would have been if we looked back, but I think the 2,500's the safest,
But
you
as
know,
long as
so, yeah.
I'm comfortable, as long as you've analyzed it.
Yeah.
Anything else on that? Okay. Moving on to page 37. We have maintenance of vehicles. We have printing forms. Anything on those? Okay, so we'll go into economic development. And obviously, the addition is the Brookhaven grant for $150,000. The Walmart and the Home Depot, and there was discussion about taking another look, and you said you adjusted the Walmart amount?
Yeah, what I am looking at for the numbers you're reading next year for 290,000, and then I up to 300 and then 330. So I'll make those changes in the.
So you're saying for next year's budget, you changed from 283.5 to 290?
Yes.
Okay, and then what's the next year?
3 something.
Yeah, I have to pull that sheet up here. Hold on.
So then any increases gets abated back to them. So do we actually get more money if to get more sales through them then?
No.
The amount we receive from sales tax is fixed as of the time we entered into the agreement. Until we pay off, we have a $2 million incentive to them and a $2 million incentive to the real estate developer. But those were issued at 8% compound interest. It was the only way they would do it, or Walmart was going to move.
Correct.
8% on the $2 million is $160,000 a year from year one that started growing. It's not going to be paid off in my lifetime. So they get, until that all gets paid off, we don't receive any additional dollars.
So whether they grow or not, it doesn't matter to us.
All new sales tax revenue.
They get all of it. The only difference is, right now, the developer has not received anything. Walmart receives the first $300,000. So if we go over 300,000, Walmart would get the 300, and the developer would get 2 or 3,000, whatever that's nominal excess was, to work down their 2 million that's now grown to probably $3 million over these years.
And Mike, we get about the first 900,000. I forget the exact number, but it's about
divulge
that.
that number,
So
but
yeah,
we get
any sales, it's obviously good because there's more customers and things, but it's not coming to us.
And for the people that are at home, and Tom, you were not on the council when this happened, Walmart's situation is that any type of location they've gone into in the state of Illinois, they set up an incentive like this. It's every one of them,
The other thing is they own the real estate. They always own their real estate, which is interesting. And if they move out, they're very reluctant to sell it, to allow somebody else to move in. So we would have really sacrificed a big number, so we gave them this incentive to at least keep our base intact.
So you,
Basically, that store would have gone black, and they keep it black for 5 years. So you would have had a center where half of it was closed down.
So what happens when they move? Do we still owe them that $2 million?
Unless we pay it. No.
I think the agreement requires them to stay open, but I would have to check
Yeah,
that.
the only
Pretty
way
sure
they
it does.
get paid, though, is through generating sales tax.
Yeah.
So-
Right.
Yeah, I don't,
It's
they,
not that
the
it's not that
intent
we
is
owe
they
them.
don't move until that
I mean-
incentive is done.
the fact is Walmart and Home Depot, as we like to say, are 1 and 1A when it comes to retail, and they produce over, 1.6 million in sales tax revenue.
It's a good number. The other one that's
So-
significant that most people don't realize is Jewel.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Joe.
So.
Yeah.
And what's nice about Home Depot as well as Walmart, as I like to say, they're kind of Amazon-proof. People that go to Walmart, they shop at Walmart. They're not going to go online to turn around and order stuff. People that go to Home Depot, they want to get stuff done. They want to, do supplies. They want to do, something over the weekend. They're not going to necessarily go to Amazon. So that's
They also
one
want
of,
to talk to the people that work there
Correct.
and get the opinion.
that's one of the nice things about those 2 units that we have in Darien. So.
Walmart's also got a very aggressive online presence now and growing.
With Home Depot, would there be any interest of Menards or Lowe's, since they're so far away? Lowe's is all the way to Bolingbrook and Menards and
We-
Countryside. I was just
Dan, you want to address that? 'Cause we
Home
did
Depot
look at
prices
that.
are
Home
high.
Depot, again, Home Depot was something that we did the incentive with specifically because they were looking at the location. And part of that was with a competitor that was coming potentially to Westmont. So we were able to sequester Home Depot to stay where they're at. Otherwise, they were just going to basically go black, and the Woodridge store would have continued to thrive from there. And they won't. And obviously, the one in Woodridge is a block to block out
Yeah.
Lowe's or Menards. So
yeah, their prices are high on 2x4s.
that's the
and other
simple
stuff,
answer.
yeah, compared to Menards. So
Yeah, the good thing about Home Depot, if their sales grow, our base grows.
Goes well, okay.
We've got
there's
this
no
fixed line
cap
for
though,
10
right?
years. I'm sorry.
On Home Depot, there's no cap. I mean,
Right, we owe them $68,000 a year for 10 years, and that's
that's it.
Right.
So, okay.
Any more discussion on the economic development? Okay. Moving forward, we've got supplies, training and education, travel meetings, vehicle, gas, and oil. Okay. And then we go into contractual services. Any discussion? Okay. Page 38, more contractual services. And lastly, equipment's listed with nothing in the budget. Is there any more questions, concerns, opposition to anything in community development, other than what we've discussed already? Okay. Okay. Well, with
Actually, I
that
have a
being
quick
s-
question for
Yes.
Mike. You said we're already at 69,533 for professional reimbursements. Is there a cause for that, or we're only saying 68 again this year? So is that a one-time deal that you think it's going to be higher?
Well, if you notice, it's reimbursable, so as that number goes up, those are expenses that we have that we should be reimbursed.
Oh, that we're getting
to,
okay.
So it really should be a wash.
Okay.
Well, okay, go ahead. Any
Mr.
more,
Dunn.
any else have comments before we wrap it up for the night?
Just a quick blurb from a taxpayer standpoint. Would we theoretically get more from Amazon from a Darien resident purchasing online through Amazon than getting reimbursed through the state, or for someone going to Walmart? I know it's a hypothetical, but just tossing it out there. So should I tell my residents
Well,
to
if they're-
support Amazon versus Walmart? I don't know. Just
Are you saying if they go in and order it within the store, or
yeah,
go
if you had to
online?
get say toilet paper versus walking into Walmart or just ordering it from Amazon, what's better for the city?
It should be about a wash, but the sales tax that you pay when you order online is just subject to a state rate. It doesn't include the municipal portion.
okay.
So we probably do get less on an
okay.
online sale than a walk-in sale.
Not yet, right? Then they're gonna go to zip code.
Yeah, in the
But it also goes to the state first, so we're not getting it as quickly.
Yeah, and my bet is they probably.
And who knows if
have
they're
an
gonna share.
administrative charge
They don't always
before we
share
get
the
it.
money they get.
There's
5%.
there's also something called the Local Government Distributive Fund, which is a collection of all taxes in the state of Illinois, and every year, the state of Illinois puts X amount of dollars in the LGDF. There was a time when the state put 10% of those revenues in the LGDF, and those are revenues that come back and help you pay for police services and transportation services. A number of years ago, that was decreased to almost 4%. And when I say we're lobbying the state legislature to get that back up to 10%. Pritzker today gave his budget report, and in his budget report, the LGDF was actually reduced. So less money is going to be coming back to the municipalities through LGDF. DuPage mayors and managers, though, is really lobbying the state and your state legislator to get that up to this year 8.5, next year 9, and the following year up to 10. So that's something that if you do go down to Springfield, you want to talk about. But that is a source of revenue.
Well, he's actually using it as a threat. He's got a knife to our throat.
Right.
He's saying if he doesn't get his graduated income tax, then he will cut the reimbursement to us, basically take it out of our hide. He wants to use that as a threat to try and encourage us to push for the
It's a
graduated
quid pro
tax.
quo.
That's a word we
With
should all
that
watch
said,
how we say it.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank everybody for their time tonight. I want to thank everybody for their patience with me being a newbie
Mary,
at the
super
helm.
job, super
Well, no,
job.
but
Seriously.
my little
Super job.
friend Tom, 2 doors down here, made a little, I'm open to, criticism and also suggestions, but I am looking forward to sitting down here again with all of you next Tuesday, the 25th at 6:30. I promise to bring treats and drinks again, water that is. And sometimes when I say drinks, people know me too well and they think other things. We did, I think, make some good progress tonight. We will be starting off next week with our main man here, Dan, and Chris with Municipal Services, going with streets and capital projects. And then we'll be moving on to enterprise funds.
Municipal Services thanks you very much, Mary.
Okay, top of the order. No, we also have to have our police chief have his say next week too. So we'll figure out the
won't worry
order,
about the
but
police.
chief will be here next week and we will be going over the police. And
By
we
the
did
way,
have some talk tonight.
Next week, Dan, just for the council, Tom Zergott will be here from Tria Architecture.
I'm sorry, he can't make next
Can't
week.
make
It's
it.
gonna have to be for the, March 3rd.
Okay.
Or we could do it at the city council, whatever the,
Tria is the group that did the space analysis for the municipal services complex, public works complex. And I wanted him to make that presentation to you as part of the budget.
Okay, well, hopefully, we are scheduled next week and the 25th with our, the following meeting, the 3rd of March. And God help us if we have to go to the 10th of March. But that's the plan, and everybody have a good night, and we are adjourned at 9:11. And you can take snacks to go.
Okay.